Chapter 612. 5 Moves. The Big Dipper Phoenix's cultivation base was already at the heavenly immortal stage, and she had many people behind her. She was confident she could defeat Long Chen. In their eyes, Long Chen's words were just stubbornness before his death. However, the Big Dipper Phoenix looked at Long Chen with a playful smile on her face. She said to Long Chen indifferently, "What right do you have to say that? Even if your battle prowess is exceedingly high, the other two teams will return in a short while. How do you plan to deal with more than 1,000 of us by yourself?" As soon as the Big Dipper Phoenix finished speaking, the crowd roared with laughter as they surrounded Long Chen. One could not fly in the air, so it was no different from a fool's dream to escape from the encirclement of so many people. Long Chen stared at the Big Dipper Phoenix and said in a low voice, "Whether you can take me down or not will depend on your abilities. However, if you insist on doing this, you'll die in front of me today." As soon as Long Chen finished speaking, he turned into a phantom and charged toward the Big Dipper Phoenix. The Big Dipper Phoenix was stunned at first, but she soon burst into laughter. If it were not for her feminine face, perhaps people would have mistaken her for a magnanimous man. The onlookers were even more stunned. No one had expected Long Chen to take the initiative to attack under such circumstances. The heavenly immortal stage powerhouse's celestial chi did not disperse and forcibly dispersed the mist within 1,000 meters. Long Chen took a deep breath. He knew he might have to fight with his life on the line today. He could not possibly erase the star veins and give up on the fight for the blazing sun because his current cultivation base was not enough to fight against the sovereign. Moreover, Yu Baigu was waiting for him outside. Today, he could only win. A hint of determination flashed in Long Chen's eyes. However, at this moment, the Big Dipper Phoenix's saber whistled and a wave of vast celestial chi swept out in all directions. At the same time, the Big Dipper Phoenix shouted, "Stand down, all of you. I want to see how strong this person is today. If you can defeat me in 10 moves, I'll spare your life today." The Big Dipper Phoenix did not seem like a woman. She was more like a high-spirited warrior on the battlefield. As soon as he said that, the surrounding people stopped attacking, but their faces gradually turned gloomy. The reason why they followed the Big Dipper Phoenix was so that they could fight against the other forces and kill Long Chen to obtain the reward of serene white bones. It doesn't matter. The Big Dipper Phoenix's battle prowess is extremely high. She doesn't intend to fight to the death with Long Chen. He won't be able to defeat her within 10 moves. Let's wait and see for now. It's not like we're afraid he'll run away. Everyone stood around, not intending to make a move. On the other side, the two groups of people who had just left also swiftly returned after hearing the news. At this moment, Long Chen and the Big Dipper Phoenix had begun to fight. Long Chen couldn't help but take a deep look at the Big Dipper Phoenix. This person's saber technique was extremely powerful, and he had even condensed a saber soul. His cultivation had even reached the 6th level of the heaven immortal realm. With Long Chen's cultivation at the peak of the Earth celestial stage, it would not be easy for him to defeat her in 10 moves. After testing the waters, Long Chen took a deep breath and attacked again. Now he had no other choice. If he could defeat the Big Dipper Phoenix in 10 moves, it would be best if she could retreat. If there were any changes, Long Chen could only take one step at a time. The place where the sun was fighting was really full of danger. The rules were also strange and inexplicable. Formless sword art, formless sword cup body. Celestial art, heavenly saber hanging river. Bang! The first exchange of blows between the two of them caused airwaves in the fog and set off gusts of wind. The surrounding people could not help but retreat in shock. They looked at each other and were shocked by the battle prowess of the two of them. Long Chen was only at the peak of the Earth celestial stage, but his celestial strength was even richer than that of an ordinary initial stage of the heaven celestial stage. The sharpness of his sword technique was also unparalleled. The formless sword art was impossible to guard against. He actually forced the Big Dipper Phoenix to retreat 100 meters with just one blow. The Big Dipper Phoenix was not afraid at all. Instead, she laughed and her eyes were full of battle intent. She shouted, "Very good. In terms of battle prowess, I'm not as good as you. However, you only have 9 moves to kill me." Celestial Technique, Purgatory Wild Blade. The Big Dipper Phoenix attacked again. Suddenly, the sky was filled with saber shadows and wisps of blood-red light. The place where the saber light landed was like purgatory. Longchen attacked again. He used the evil dragon staff in his hand again with his sword technique. The sword once again forced the Big Dipper Phoenix to retreat. A ray of sword light even brushed past the Big Dipper Phoenix's right arm and passed through the crowd and into the fog. Boom! Boom! Again! The saber and sword clashed again and again. 10 moves were over in the blink of an eye. Longchen's last sword fell and landed on the Big Dipper Phoenix's neck. Celestial strength fluctuated on it. Everyone knew that the moment the sword moved, the Big Dipper Phoenix's head would be sent flying, would be the moment her body would collapse. Within 10 moves, Longchen had won with the 10th sword. The Big Dipper Phoenix's face showed no fear despite the sword on her neck. She said in a low voice, "You deliberately hid your strength. If you had defeated me, I wouldn't have needed 10 moves." Longchen nodded and said, "Your cultivation is much higher than mine. If we were in the outside world, I wouldn't be able to defeat you within 10 moves. However, celestial strength is suppressed here. Our attacks will be corroded by celestial strength. Therefore, the strength of our attacks is already at 50%. In terms of moves, I can defeat you by at most 5 moves." The surrounding people paled. The cultivation that Longchen displayed when he killed Yu Hongxue had already shocked everyone. But now, he could defeat the Big Dipper Phoenix in just 5 moves in this fog. This was simply too heaven-defying. Let the Big Dipper Phoenix go. A few people in the crowd were the Big Dipper Phoenix's trusted aides. They wanted to order Longchen to release the Big Dipper Phoenix. "Shut up." Just as a dozen people stepped forward, the Big Dipper Phoenix harumphed coldly and stopped them. She turned to Longchen and said coldly, "Then what are you waiting for? Just kill me." Longchen smiled and didn't say much. "With your cultivation, you can kill any one of these people in less than 10 moves. However, if they join forces, even if you and I join forces, I'm afraid we'll have a slim chance of survival. But you can make them listen to you. You really have some skills. It's a pity that such a person dies." Longchen's eyes flashed as he spoke. He didn't seem to care about his own situation at all. The Big Dipper Phoenix frowned slightly. She also felt the change in Longchen. After pondering for a moment, the Big Dipper Phoenix's expression suddenly darkened. She shouted, "Attack and kill this person. He's waiting for the surrounding demonic beasts to come. Since I've lost, I won't stop you anymore. If you kill me, it's my own fault. Whether you can leave or not will depend on your luck." As soon as she finished speaking, the Big Dipper Phoenix's immortal chi exploded. Longchen's expression changed. He hadn't expected the Big Dipper Phoenix, a woman, to be so unafraid of death. Longchen admired the Big Dipper Phoenix's courage. The weapon in his hand didn't directly shatter the Big Dipper Phoenix's body. Instead, it sent her flying. Chapter 613. To lure a beast. As soon as Longchen finished speaking, he took advantage of the fact that the Big Dipper Phoenix was sent flying and slashed out dozens of times with his sword. However, these dozens of swords still didn't fall into the crowd. Instead, they rushed towards the fog in all directions. Everyone was originally on high alert, but at this moment, they were stunned, not knowing what Longchen was doing. However, in the next moment, everyone's expression changed drastically. The roars of various demon beasts could be heard from all directions. Oh no! Everyone's heart sank to the bottom. No wonder this person needed to wait until the 10th move to defeat the Big Dipper Phoenix. He wants to use this opportunity to lure the demonic beasts from all directions. Originally, I was curious as to why this person's every move was so majestic and carried boundless might. So this was the reason. Quickly kill this person and then spread out. Otherwise, if more than 10 demonic beasts charge at us, we will suffer countless casualties. Everyone kept shouting, and countless people's eyes fell on Long Chen. Long Chen's expression had completely calmed down. The last few slashes of his sword had already confirmed that there were demonic beasts coming. Thus, today's threat had already been resolved. A few men in the early stage of the Heaven Celestial stage charged forward, trying to block Long Chen's path. However, a blood sword quickly shot out from their necks. Long Chen had killed 3 powerhouses at the 3rd level of the Heavenly Immortal stage with a single slash. Big Dipper Phoenix, why aren't you making a move? The Heavenly Immortals turned pale with astonishment because Long Chen's combat strength had completely exceeded their expectations. Even if everyone swarmed forward, they would not be able to kill Long Chen in a short period of time. However, there was not enough time. Otherwise, even if they managed to kill Long Chen, they would still be surrounded by the demonic beasts. At this moment, only the Big Dipper Phoenix made a move. If she made a move, she would be able to take down Long Chen in a short time with the help of everyone. Hundreds of Heavenly Immortals stared fixedly at Long Chen, slashing out countless immortal energy attacks at the same time. However, Long Chen relied on his powerful movement technique to block them all. Although he was seriously injured, he was still calm and composed. Unless these Heavenly Immortals were completely unafraid of death and attacked with all their might, otherwise, it would take at least an hour for them to kill him with such cowardice. However, when the Big Dipper Phoenix looked at Long Chen, he shook his head and said, "Since I said that I would spare his life if he could defeat me within 10 moves, then I won't attack. Whether or not you can defeat him will depend on your own luck." The Big Dipper Phoenix's eyes were filled with disdain. As far as she was concerned, if a few tens of Heavenly Immortals attacked Long Chen with all their might, then they would be able to easily lead everyone to annihilate Long Chen. But none of them were willing to do so. Was this a man of indomitable spirit? All the men in her eyes were nothing more than this. The Big Dipper Phoenix sneered and took a deep look at Long Chen. Then, he quickly left the place with his men. At this moment, the roars of demonic beasts from all directions had already reached the heavens. Fog rolled in all directions, as if there were countless giant whales breathing in the sea of fog. "Hurry up and leave. If we don't leave now, none of us will be able to leave. Don't bother about Long Chen anymore. Even if he's still alive, once he reaches the White Light Fruit Tree, only death awaits him." The White Light Fruit Tree. This man is lucky. Let's hurry to the White Light Fruit Tree and seize the opportunity. As the Heavenly Immortals left, Long Chen instantly felt the pressure on him lessen greatly. As soon as the crowd dispersed, a gap opened up. Long Chen leaped into the fog. He had just charged less than 100 meters when a mountain-sized spider charged at him. This beast was not a real demonic beast. It was also an ordinary insect. However, under the special rules of this place, these insects were already comparable to Heavenly Immortal demonic beasts. Moreover, they were even more terrifying. White spiderwebs blotted out the sky and fell toward Long Chen. The beast's black armor was filled with steel needle-like hair. There were even dark green eyes on top of it. It was extremely eerie. Bang! Long Chen wielded the evil dragon staff and slashed forward. However, his body suddenly stopped. The evil dragon staff, a divine weapon ranked 3rd on the divine weapon ranking, was actually almost unable to cut through the spider webs. These demonic beasts are far stronger than the ones we encountered when we first stepped into this place. It seems that the closer we get to the Meru Spirit Tree, the stronger these demonic beasts become. The rules of this place really seize the fortune of heaven and earth. Long Chen slashed dozens of times consecutively. His body narrowly escaped from the spider's claws. He really could not imagine what level the bottom zone steel was, to be able to shrink so many cultivators. In fact, even if they were shrunk, they would not dare to be hunted by a group of insects. However, these insects were also strengthened by some kind of rules. Otherwise, how could they have such combat strength? Long Chen broke through the spider webs. He did not dare to relax in the slightest. He stepped on the spider webs and leaped onto the beast's back. Then, using the momentum, he shot down 100 meters. At the same time, the furious roars of demonic beasts could be heard from all directions, followed by countless mournful cries of humans. There were even countless immortal powers that soared into the sky, causing the fog to surge violently. Roar, roar, roar. The moment Longchen landed, he felt the originally calm fog in front of him rush toward him like a tsunami. The dense corrosive power multiplied, causing the immortal powers around him to emit a scalp-numbing corrosive sound. Not good. Longchen's expression changed drastically. His entire aura was concealed. He turned around and actually rushed toward the spider. True immortal technique, chaotic star explosion slash. Formless sword technique, third style. Die for me. Longchen's immortal power reached its peak. The evil dragon staff fiercely pierced into the beast's head. Longchen did not even care about the attack coming from the right, Pucci. Half of Longchen's body was pierced, but the evil dragon staff had also completely sunk into the beast's head. Then, immortal powers exploded, directly smashing the beast's head. Longchen did not have time to reform his body and heal his injuries. His entire body bent down, and like a fish, he slid under the beast's body. Then, he tore open the beast's abdomen and hid inside. This series of actions did not even take 10 breaths. The mountain-sized beast crashed down with a loud bang. Rumble, roar, roar, roar. The earth shook violently. Countless clouds of fog rushed out without any pattern like raging waves beating against the shore. Dozens of huge demonic beasts appeared where Longchen had been, and then rushed toward the place where Longchen and the Big Dipper Phoenix were dueling. The immortal powers that soared into the sky seemed to be an unparalleled temptation to them. This scene was happening all around Longchen and the Big Dipper Phoenix's disciples. Perhaps even Longchen did not expect to attract so many demonic beasts. At this moment, there were at least 200 different types of insects gathered here. This was clearly a disaster. The 1,000 or so people who had gathered here were now either dead or injured. The more immortal powers they used, the more demonic beasts they attracted. The smell of blood gradually spread through the bloody fog. On the other side, under the white light fruit tree, 2 teams of several hundred people were madly fighting. The 2 teams were less than 10,000 meters away from the white light fruit tree. Chapter 6:14. Joining hands in front of the white light fruit tree, the 2 groups of people already began to clash. One of them was the group led by Yubaigu's 6 sons, while the other group was led by Shirhao's close to 500 heavenly immortal realm experts. These 2 groups of people clearly took advantage of the time when Longchen and the Big Dipper Phoenix were fighting to rush over from the sides, wishing to directly seize the Sumeru's spiritual tree. Roar, roar, roar. While everyone was fighting, they also felt waves of fiend beast roars. Waves of white mist swept over everyone like a tsunami. What is the Big Dipper Phoenix doing? Why would it attract so many fiend beasts? Shirhao held an enormous meteor hammer in his hands, all of his muscles releasing immortal force as he roared out. Ping ping ping. When his voice fell, he was forced back by several streaks of sword radiance. The ones who took action were the black-robed heavenly palace people. This person's face was sallow and skinny, but his body wasn't much different from Shirhao's. After this person hacked out a few times, he coldly said to Shirhao, "Hurry up and get lost. This thing is mine." Right now, the 2 groups of people were right in front of the Sumeru's spiritual tree. Who's willing to take a step back? When they saw the opportunity before their eyes, everyone rushed forward while fighting. However, when they only moved a dozen or so meters, they would be stopped, becoming the target of public criticism. In that instant, everyone who wasn't originally in the white mist was slowly swallowed up by the white mist. Immediately afterwards, everyone gradually stopped the attacks in their hands, all of them backing up. Immediately afterwards, a wave of earth-shaking sounds rang out. Close to 200 mountain-like fiend beasts rushed at them. These fiend beasts were covered in blood, clearly the same group of fiend beasts that attacked Longchen and the others just now. They formed a beast tide, and then they were attracted by the immortal force here. On the other side, Longchen hid in the chest of the enormous spider. Only when there were no more fiend beast sounds from the outside world did he slowly walk out. Only now did he discover that almost 2/3 of this enormous spider's body had been crushed. Long Chen's damaged flesh began to quickly recover. As a mortal force surged, all of the filth on his body was also completely removed. Immediately afterwards, Long Chen once again turned into a streak of flowing light, heading towards the Sumeru's spiritual tree. This Sumeru's spiritual tree could be seen clearly no matter where one was, as if its image had already entered one's soul. It was the same even in the white fog. This item was a must-have item for the 4th stage. Not long after he left, Long Chen came face to face with a few people who had blasted open the bodies of 2 demonic beasts and jumped out from within. When their eyes met, Long Chen's lips curled into a smile. Surprisingly, these people were the ones led by Big Dipper Phoenix. They left as soon as possible and had enough time to kill a demonic beast and hide inside. The Big Dipper Phoenix stared at Long Chen with a slightly amused expression. The heavenly immortal realm experts behind her seemed as if they were facing a formidable enemy, and they seemed to intend to make a move and capture Long Chen. Long Chen stared at Big Dipper Phoenix and the people behind him and said indifferently, "With the strength of the few of you now, I'm afraid you can't keep me here. Why are you asking for trouble?" Before the Big Dipper Phoenix could say anything, the faces of the heaven immortals behind her turned ashen. However, they did not have the slightest confidence in killing Long Chen. Although Long Chen was at the Earth Immortal Realm, his combat strength was too terrifying. Even Big Dipper Phoenix was defeated within 10 moves, and that was enough to show how terrifying he was. Big Dipper Phoenix waved her hand in motion for them to calm down. Then, she stared at Long Chen and said with a smile, "If you want to leave, we naturally can't stop you. However, if you want to seize the white light fruit tree, it won't be easy." Long Chen stopped in his tracks and looked deeply at Big Dipper Phoenix. After a moment of silence, he said, "Tell me about it. We've wasted too much time here with you. Listen carefully to the sound of the demonic beasts and the fluctuation of the fog caused by the immortal chi, and you'll know that the other 2 groups have already left before us. At this moment, you and I will join hands and seize the opportunity to seize the white light fruit tree. Only then will we have a chance of winning." Long Chen said in a deep voice, "I want 3 white fruits, 30 leaves, and the roots of this tree." Big Dipper Phoenix was stunned when she heard that. She looked deeply at Long Chen and agreed directly. In her eyes, the most important thing of this tree was the bright white fruits on it. The leaves and roots were definitely second. She thought to herself that Long Chen didn't ask for too much. However, she didn't know that Long Chen didn't care about the white fruits and the so-called leaves at all. What he really wanted was the roots of this tree. With the roots of this Meru spirit tree, he could step into the heaven celestial stage and open up a cave abode in his body. This was the long-lost foundation of the earth celestial stage from the primordial age to the heaven celestial stage. After a short conversation, Long Chen and Big Dipper Phoenix reached an agreement. Then, Long Chen and Big Dipper Phoenix left one after another. After Long Chen left, the people behind Big Dipper Phoenix suddenly became vigilant. One of them asked in a deep voice, "How trustworthy is this person? If he leaves after seizing the white light fruit tree, what can we do?" Big Dipper Phoenix shook her head and said, "At least, seizing this tree from him is much better than seizing it from the Yuanshire families. Right now, we are weak. If we want to take drastic measures, we can only cooperate with this person." As soon as she finished speaking, Big Dipper Phoenix brought a few people and rushed towards the Meru spirit tree. As everyone moved forward, low roars quickly entered everyone's ears. Sure enough, the scene here was surprisingly similar to before. The huge beast tide was attracted by the immoral power and gathered more and more. If this continued, no matter how many people there were, they would all die here. Long Chen watched from afar and didn't take action. A moment later, an inscription flickered in front of him. Seeing the flickering inscription, Long Chen's eyes narrowed. His entire body turned into a stream of light and rushed towards the white light fruit tree, on the other side. Big Dipper Phoenix had already rushed into the center of the chaotic battle. She ignored the dangers around her and directly rushed towards Shihao. At the same time, she shouted, "I will kill Shihao and the others with you first, then we will divide this tree equally." As soon as she finished speaking, Big Dipper Phoenix rushed towards Shirhao with all her strength. The hundreds of heavenly immortals led by Ubaigu's sons were stunned. Soon after, the eyes of the leaders revealed coldness. They knew that Shirhao's group was their biggest obstacle. As long as they broke through Shirhao's group, the white light fruit tree would be easy to obtain. With Big Dipper Phoenix's participation, they would definitely be able to kill Shirhao in a short period of time and break apart this group of hundreds of heavenly immortals. As for whether they would divide it equally later, they didn't care. In the blink of an eye, with Big Dipper Phoenix's participation, the two groups of people completely fought. They even ignored the attacks of the surrounding demonic beasts. Big Dipper Phoenix and the people behind her were all extraordinary. Even though facing Shirhao was a bit strenuous, killing the 100 or so heavenly immortal realm cultivators behind him was extremely easy. Chapter 6:15. A comical scene. The Big Dipper Phoenix, the remaining 6 sons of the Yu family, and Shirhao were the most popular candidates for this battle. They were also the most powerful individuals participating in this battle. Among them, the Big Dipper Phoenix was relatively weaker. Regardless of whether it was Shirhao or the 6 sons of the Yu family, they all knew that once this woman went crazy, they would all be in trouble. With the addition of the Big Dipper Phoenix, the hundreds of people behind him gradually began to feel the urge to retreat. Shirhao's tall and sturdy body rose and fell like a bellows due to his anger. He shouted, "Big Dipper Phoenix, do you really think the 6 sons of the Yu family can be trusted? I'm afraid that in the end, they might even kill their own brothers." However, the Big Dipper Phoenix remained unmoved. In the blink of an eye, another 100 breaths passed. Shirhao's entire body quickly retreated, disappearing into the white mist. Shirhao and the hundreds of people behind him were defeated. The 6 sons of the Yu family rushed towards the white light fruit tree without any hesitation. When they leapt out, the surrounding demonic beasts immediately rushed towards them. However, they didn't even try to defend themselves. They all relied on their movement techniques to dodge. Some of them didn't even slow down in the slightest despite their serious injuries. When they attacked, they even deliberately released powerful immortal energy into the crowd to attract the beast tide. Only the Big Dipper Phoenix led the people behind her to escape from the beast tide. Mournful cries rang out endlessly. Those who could preserve their lives in the beast tide were few and far between. On the other side, the 6 sons of the Yu family were all flushed red, and their breathing became hurried. At this moment, the white light fruit tree was less than 1,000 meters in front of them. You all came too late. However, at this moment, a streak of light flew over. Immortal energy filled the air, forming a giant hand that was several meters in size. It uprooted the entire white light fruit tree. Long Chen. Why are you here? It's the Big Dipper Phoenix. She's purposely stalling us. Let go. Angry shouts rang out one after another. The 6 of them even used immortal techniques on Long Chen from several hundred meters away. Wang, Wang, Wang. However, at this moment, the moment the Shumi spiritual tree was uprooted, a series of rumbling sounds rang out. Inscriptions appeared in the sky once again. The originally tyrannical demonic beasts instantly froze in place. Even the space seemed to have stopped. Long Chen felt his ears ringing incessantly. The white fog in the surroundings also began to roll back. When the 6 sons of the Yu family attacked Long Chen again, the sky was filled with immortal energy. Only then did everyone realize that they had returned to their original appearance and were once again standing in the huge palace. They're here. They're finally here. Is this the end of the 4th stage? That's Long Chen, he's actually still alive. Quick, look at his hand. What kind of spiritual item is that? When he waves it, it actually fills the sky with spiritual light. There are actually less than 1,000 people left. The Battle of the Blazing Suns is about to enter the final stage. Just who will be the one to leave their names on the Regent Steel? When they appeared, the people in the 4 sky cities cried out in surprise. However, the crowd soon realized that everyone's eyes were fixed on the spirit tree in Long Chen's hand. In the huge field, The 6 sons of the Yu family followed closely behind Longchen, their expressions ugly. People from all directions quickly gathered around Longchen. Big Dipper Phoenix and the others were among them. However, just at that moment, the weapon in Longchen's hand moved. The root of the tree was immediately cut off by him. He also took 3 fruits, then the branches and leaves. Seeing that everyone was closing in, Longchen didn't hesitate to throw the remaining items at Big Dipper Phoenix. When Big Dipper Phoenix saw this, she couldn't help but slow down. She didn't expect Longchen to be so decisive. Big Dipper Phoenix's hand was filled with immortal energy, and the spirit tree was also extremely fast. In the next moment, it landed in her hand. Many pairs of eyes, including the 6 sons of the Yu family, landed on her as well. Big Dipper Phoenix looked deeply at Longchen and couldn't help but shake her head and smile bitterly. She originally wanted to take a share of the loot, but she didn't expect Longchen to be so tempted and use such a method to divert the trouble. At that moment, almost all of the survivors were in the heavenly celestial stage. Less than 200 people were in the earth celestial stage. However, everyone who had made it this far had their own methods. Most of the late-stage earth celestial stage cultivators were comparable to heavenly celestials. Compared to the tree root and 3 white fruits in Longchen's hand, everyone's eyes were fixed on Big Dipper Phoenix's hand. Big Dipper Phoenix shook her head. She knew that no one could take the tree for themselves. Although this hall was hundreds of thousands of miles wide, it was like a cage under the attacks of nearly 1,000 people. Big Dipper Phoenix waved her hand and took 2 white fruits and a dozen tree branches. Then, she threw the tree out as well. It landed in the hands of one of Yu family's sons. When Yumubai caught the tree, he was immediately attacked by his brothers. However, he still took 2 white fruits with his claws before throwing the tree out. Such a comical scene made everyone on the spectator stands flabbergasted. Everyone could see that the tree was extraordinary. However, it had also become a hot potato. Once it landed in someone's hands, they would immediately become the target of everyone. This hall was at the center of the 4 cities. It wasn't outside. Once they chased after it, they would be surrounded. The inscriptions in the sky were still condensing. It seemed like the 5th stage would open soon. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the Meru spirit tree was divided among a few people in a short period of time. Those who obtained a portion of the tree were extremely excited. If they didn't know that the tree was extraordinary, they would have immediately sat down cross-legged to refine it. However, apart from the 6 sons of the Yu family, Big Dipper Phoenix, and less than 10 other people had obtained the tree. Everyone else had nothing in their hands. Gradually, a sinister expression appeared on their faces. Their gazes landed on those with weaker cultivations. Then, they pounced on them. There were even 100 people who looked at Longchen from afar. After all, he still had 3 spirit fruits, the tree leaves, and the roots. The most important thing was to kill him and obtain the 10,000 celestial items. However, when they chased after it for a while, when they saw Longchen, they saw that Longchen was sitting cross-legged at this moment. His entire body was covered in a waterfall of spiritual light. Although they didn't know, everyone in the spectator stands could see it clearly. After Longchen threw out the spirit tree, he ran for less than 10,000 meters. He began to swallow the spirit fruits, branches, leaves, and roots directly. Oh no, this person is going to step into the heaven celestial stage. In the previous stage, he was safe after swallowing 100 pearls. This time, it will be the same. We can't let him step into the heaven celestial stage. Otherwise, I'm afraid he will win the title of Blazing Sun today. This person is already in the earth celestial stage, but he can crush those in the heaven celestial stage. If he steps into the heaven celestial stage, who can be his opponent? As more than 100 people exclaimed, streaks of immortal light condensed crazily. They gathered for 1,000 feet and crazily fell on Longchen. On the other side, everyone heard their exclamations. Their expressions changed drastically. Chapter 6:16. Under the Dominator. When the remaining people heard that Longchen was breaking through again, they all rushed over. In fact, many people had already launched countless attacks at Long Chen before they even got close. However, the attacks disappeared as soon as they got close to Long Chen. Beams of white light condensed and surrounded Long Chen like an impenetrable wall. Bang! 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 A series of explosions resounded between heaven and earth. Everyone turned pale with fright. On the spectator stands of the 4 heavenly cities. Countless people sat up in shock and stared at Long Chen. In the blink of an eye, less than 10 days had passed. Long Chen was about to break through again. Whether it was his frenzied devouring of the white beads or the spirit fruits he was currently devouring, everyone could see Long Chen's potential. What kind of monster is he? Could it be that his body can withstand such a huge amount of spiritual energy? This person's talent is probably beyond our imagination. He's about to step into the sky immoral realm in such a short time. The barrier between realms is practically non-existent. If that's the case, Long Chen will probably leave his name on the 10th domain monument. There's no doubt about it. Leave his name? So what? The one in front of him is the Dark Ghost ruler. Whether or not he wins today, he'll definitely die. Many people discussed among themselves. In the end, they couldn't help but look at the Dark Ghost ruler in the sky. Everyone fell silent. This was because the Dark Ghost ruler's expression was as cold as ice, and his killing intent was faintly discernible. Inside the enormous heavy meteor or palace, a scene that everyone's attention was drawn to. All the heavenly palace stars participating in the Battle of the Blazing Suns were gathered around Long Chen. Countless attacks were frantically aimed at Long Chen. However, not a single attack could break through the white light around Long Chen's body. No one noticed that the Big Dipper Phoenix was looking deeply at Long Chen, then slowly retreated. Withdraw from the Battle of the Blazing Suns. Once this person breaks through to the sky immortal realm, no one will be his match. As soon as she finished speaking, she wiped away the star pattern on her hand almost without hesitation. The heavenly immortals behind the Big Dipper Phoenix couldn't help but dissuade her. However, they hadn't even opened their mouths when they noticed the Big Dipper Phoenix's figure had vanished on the spot. They looked deeply at Long Chen. 2 of them smiled bitterly and left with the Big Dipper Phoenix. The people who stayed behind said gloomily, "I think the Big Dipper Phoenix has been scared out of his wits. There's no white mist here, so why would we fear any heavenly immortal?" That's right. Besides, we're not the only ones here. Long Chen is the target of public criticism. Instead of leaving with the Big Dipper Phoenix, they joined the crowd. Apart from the Big Dipper Phoenix, no one else left. Most of them had the same thought. Crack, crack, crack. Everyone besieged Long Chen. This kind of scene had never happened in the previous Blazing Sun battles. However, at that moment, their eyes were filled with graveness. A violent shattering sound rang out. The white light barrier around Long Chen's body began to shatter rapidly. Then, it turned into white mist and disappeared between heaven and earth. The moment the barrier dissipated, Long Chen slowly stood up. The moment Long Chen stood up, there was a dazzling light in his dantian. Everyone couldn't help but look at it. At the same time, everyone felt as if the weather had changed. Countless amounts of spiritual energy surged toward Long Chen from all directions. What's that? This person has stepped into the heavenly immortal stage. Does he still need to devour spiritual energy in such a short time? Look at his dantian. What's that? Cave abode. This is a cultivation method from the primordial era. It's the long-lost foundation establishment technique of the primordial era. Countless people stared at Long Chen's dantian. They saw an illusory black hole appear in the center of his dantian. The black hole flickered and emitted an endless suction force, tearing the spiritual energy in all directions. Rumble. The people around him retreated further and further, their hearts trembling. The 6 sons of the Yu family had gloomy expressions. They also felt an unprecedented pressure. They exchanged glances, and the few heavenly immortals behind them attacked Long Chen with all their might. Streaks of immortal energy attacks were very tricky. As long as this probing attack was slightly effective, the people in the surroundings would probably charge forward and kill Long Chen. However, a terrifying scene appeared. The evil dragon staff in Long Chen's hand streaked across the sky, and streaks of immortal energy turned into sword light. Void sword technique, void sword slaying gods. Puff, puff, puff. As the sword fell, a scalp-numbing sense of danger filled everyone's heart. The people who attacked all fell to the ground, and there was not a trace of spiritual energy in their bodies. Their souls were destroyed. The scene was terrifyingly silent. The 6 heavenly immortals who attacked all died in one move. Long Chen looked around, and his gaze was like that of a king looking down on the world. He said indifferently, "Leave the Meru spirit tree, and scram." As Long Chen's voice fell, waves of pressure spread out, and a burst of violent immortal energy swept out in all directions. The people around him could not help but take a few steps back, and they were all very wary of Long Chen. When Long Chen stepped into the Earth Immortal stage, he was not afraid of heavenly immortals. Now that he had stepped into the heavenly immortal stage, it was easy to imagine. Attack together and kill this person. If we don't kill this person, we won't have the chance to leave our names on the region tablet. If we want to kill this person, we have to attack together. Someone shouted and wanted to take the lead to kill Long Chen. However, there were still people who kept retreating and wanted to erase their star marks and leave this place. However, in the next moment, Long Chen disappeared on the spot and leaped up. He stood in the air and slashed hundreds of times in a few breaths. Ruler's celestial technique, heaven-sealing sword formation. Buzz. As Long Chen's voice fell, hundreds of sword blades formed a sword formation in the air, and the killing intent was awe-inspiring as it spread out. The sword formation was like a star in a flash, and the bodies of the people who were just about to move were all shattered in the blink of an eye. The people who spoke, the people who were about to erase their star marks, all of them died a violent death. Under the sword formation, every ray of sword light seemed to come alive. Did I ask you to erase your star marks? Long Chen held the evil dragon staff and slowly walked in front of the crowd. He said in a low voice, "Hand over the Meru spirit tree, and I'll spare your lives today." Crazy. Unprecedentedly crazy and domineering. Sovereign celestial technique? What is he talking about? There's a sovereign celestial technique above a true immortal technique? Sovereign celestial technique? Our ancestors have recorded that the last sovereign powerhouse who controlled the Battle of the Blazing Sun caused the various regions to attack and kill him. During the battle, he used a sovereign celestial technique, but Long Chen is only a heavenly immortal. How can a heavenly immortal use a sovereign celestial technique? How did he obtain this technique? The people above the 4 heavenly cities were so shocked that they stood rooted to the ground. No one expected to see such a scene right after the 4th stage ended. Chapter 6:17. Bedevilment intent. Long Chen stood alone in the main hall. None of the heavenly immortal and earth immortal star children dared to move a step. Everyone's forehead was covered in cold sweat, but they did not dare to wipe it off. The sword formation above their heads was like a sword hanging from the beam, ready to take their lives at any time. They did not expect Long Chen to be so terrifying. Was this still the battle strength of a heavenly immortal? At this moment, everyone knew. This young man named Long Chen would definitely become an existence that everyone in the 10 heavens feared. A moment ago, he stepped into the heavenly immortal stage, but now he was still invincible in the heavenly immortal stage. What Battle of the Blazing Suns, what leaving his name on the domain tablet? No one under the Dominator stage could fight with him. One by one, their hands trembled as they handed over the Sumeru spirit tree they had seized. Their faces were full of wry smiles and helplessness. Along the way, they chased Long Chen for 10,000 starry sky immortal items. But now, nearly 1,000 people actually didn't dare to move an inch under his command. The Sumeru spirit tree was thrown away by Long Chen. Now, they had no choice but to hand it over again. While smiling wryly, everyone felt lucky. At least Long Chen did not intend to take their lives. As the people holding the Sumeru spirit tree gave up, more and more people glanced at Long Chen and wiped the star patterns on their arms with wry smiles. At this moment, no one was willing to be Long Chen's enemy. If Long Chen was an Earth immortal, they would win without a doubt. Now that Long Chen had stepped into the heavenly immortal stage, they would lose without a doubt. Staring at the sword formation in the sky, they knew that the current Long Chen could not be defeated by a heavenly immortal. Perhaps the heavenly immortals of other heavens could. And now, Long Chen was the strongest person under the Dominator stage in the 10 heavens. More and more people began to leave. Long Chen also found that the Sumeru spirit tree was missing. Looking around, he shook his head. The Big Dipper Phoenix was not in the crowd. This woman was really a strange woman. Whether it was judging the situation or the way of life, she was not inferior to most men. As more and more people left, Long Chen did not stop them. In the end, there were still 6 people left. These 6 people were the remaining 6 people of the Yu family. These 6 people were from the Heavenly Palace who were participating in the Battle of the Blazing Suns. They were also the children of Yu Baigu. The 6 of them stared at Long Chen with ugly expressions on their faces, but they clearly weren't willing to give up the fight for the title of Blazing Sun. Some of them even felt that as long as Long Chen withdrew, their Yu family would have the first person with a name on the domain stele. The leader's face was gloomy. He mustered up his courage and walked towards Long Chen, trying to keep his voice calm. Then, he slowly turned to Long Chen and said, "I know that you have a grudge against my father, but as long as you withdraw from the battle for the Blazing Suns, we will definitely, Puchi." Before this person could finish his words, a sword gleam came down from above and nailed him to the ground. Long Chen's gaze was cold as he stared at the 6 people and said, "You want me to withdraw from the battle of the Blazing Suns? Today, not only will I not withdraw from the battle of the Blazing Suns, but whether you can leave or not, you'd better see if your father has eyes." As his words fell, Long Chen's gaze seemed to pierce through space, looking at the vast and majestic heavenly palace in the sky. Above the heavenly palace, Yu Wraith was surrounded by a tide of ghosts. He stared at Long Chen and said sternly, "What do you want? Send my mother out of the Vajra Demon Palace. Otherwise, all 6 of your sons will die here today." Long Chen's voice was unprecedentedly cold. He knew that at this time, he couldn't show the slightest bit of weakness. Yu Baigu couldn't be judged with common sense. Yu Baigu's face was as cold as ice. He was so angry that he started laughing. The people around him all kept quiet. No one had thought that at this juncture, Long Che would dare to threaten a ruler powerhouse. Everyone was alarmed. They would probably never encounter something like this in their entire lives. A person who had just stepped into the heavenly immortal realm was threatening a ruler powerhouse of the 10th heaven in front of the entire heaven domain, Puchi. Puchi. However, a series of bone-chilling noises told everyone that this was not a dream. Before Yu Baigu could answer, the bodies of his sons had been completely destroyed by Long Chen. In fact, seeing this scene, although everyone was timid because of Yu Baigu, they were very happy in their hearts. Almost all of Yu Baigu's sons cultivated the evil arts of ghosts, and each of them had taken countless innocent lives. Some even took pleasure in tempering the souls of ordinary people. It was said that the 4 giant baby statues on the 4 sides of the heavenly palace were condensed from the souls and resentment of hundreds of thousands of babies. "How dare you!" Yu Baigu couldn't stop trembling. Since he stepped into the ruler realm and became the strongest powerhouse of the 10th heaven, he had never suffered such humiliation. No one dared to speak like this in front of him. *1. A series of black lights turned into countless ghost dragons that fell towards Long Chen, and a violent aura swept across the entire 4 heavenly cities for hundreds of thousands of miles. Waves of colding energy made everyone feel as if their souls were being frozen. Everyone knew that at this moment, Yu Baigu was completely angry. However, his attack was blocked by the domain stele, and it didn't even cause a single ripple. The inscription of the 5th level was still condensing. The Battle of the Blazing Suns could never be interfered with by external forces. "Hand over my mother." Long Chen clenched his right hand, and the soul of one of the Yu family's disciples suddenly shattered. Yubaigu only felt a mouthful of blood coming out of his mouth, and a monstrous killing intent rose in his heart, but he had to endure. Yubaigu's voice was extremely low, and then he said, "You want your mother? Then I will bring her to you now." Asterisk Wong. Asterisk. As Yubaigu's voice fell, inscription after inscription fell from his right hand, and he actually cut space apart. Vajra Demon Palace Master, bring that remnant soul here. As Yubaigu's voice fell, Long Chen couldn't help but freeze. Remnant soul? Long Chen's body trembled uncontrollably, an immortal light flickered from his right hand. The remaining 5 Yu family members screamed miserably. When the spatial crack closed, a late-stage heaven immortal was forcefully brought over by Yubaigu. In his hand was a delicate and pretty woman. However, this woman was only a light blue remnant soul, and her eyes were filled with confusion. When the surrounding people saw this, they immediately understood. This remnant soul was one of the 3 souls. A person had 3 souls, and once separated, they would fall into chaos, neither alive nor dead. However, at the instant she looked at Long Chen, her body actually couldn't help but tremble, and strands of light appeared in her eyes. Is it Chen? The moment her voice fell, her soul seemed to return to a state of confusion, as if she had lost all consciousness. Pudong. At the location of the battle between the blazing suns, Long Chen's body trembled uncontrollably, and his eyes were filled with tears of blood. Put down my mother's soul, or today I will use my evil arts to exterminate your entire bloodline. Long Chen's voice was crazy and terrifying. The remaining 5 Yu family members' souls were actually in his hand. Not only that, but the dazzling immortal power around his body turned turbid. Chapter 6:18. Steel Shadow. Long Chen's dazzling immortal power gradually became turbid, and a pitch-black color spread from his dantian to his whole body in an instant. Buzz. However, just as the boundless pitch-black immortal power was about to pour into his knowledge sea, it suddenly stopped. Long Chen's breathing was rapid, and his eyes were full of ferocity. At this moment, he didn't seem to care about anything. He stared at Yubaigu, and said word by word, "Let them go, or I will break your bloodline today." As Long Chen's words fell, the pitch-black immortal power in his hand turned into blood-red threads that penetrated into the 5 divine souls. The 5 illusory divine souls suddenly issued shrill screams. Each sound was incomparably sharp, causing pain to the eardrums of those who heard it. Puff puff puff. At the same time, outside, Yubaigu's face suddenly turned pale, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Then, a trace of inexplicable fear appeared in his angry eyes. Ow! Immediately afterward, painful cries came from all directions of the heavenly palace. Then, one by one, people in black robes rushed in front of Yubaigu. Each of them had a faintly discernible red bloodline on their bodies. Yubaigu couldn't help trembling all over, staring at Long Chen, and said coldly, "Bloodline evil technique, who the hell are you?" In all directions. All the onlookers looked at each other, and they all saw a touch of surprise in each other's eyes. In this 10th heaven, there is someone who can play evil techniques in front of Yubaigu? Yubaigu stared at Long Chen, then turned to look at the soul in his hand, and threw it out with a wave of his hand, and said coldly, "So what if I give it to you? I want to see how you can take back her 3 souls and 7 spirits." Looking at the remnant soul slowly falling, Long Chen shouted, "Imperial Palace." Xiao! A stream of light streaked across the sky, and Long Chen's mother's remnant soul was caught in the hands of a scholar. This person was Shu San. No one knew when Shu San arrived here. But Long Chen knew that he must be here. This was because the Sumeru spirit tree on the Fortune Immortal board had appeared here. Shu San looked deeply at Long Chen and sighed, "I will send her to a safe place, but after you leave this place, the first thing you need to do is to tell me all the details about the Sumeru spirit tree." Long Chen nodded but didn't say anything. Book Mountain turned around and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The Imperial Academy was mysterious and unfathomable, yet it had helped Long Chen for the 2nd time. Many people couldn't help but speculate. However, at this moment, everyone was more concerned about Long Chen. Because if he killed Yubaigu's sons, he would be the last person in the Battle of the Blazing Suns. It was extremely likely that he would leave his name on the domain stele. Long Chen's turbid immortal energy rose and fell one after another, but it could not get close to his sea of consciousness. As Shu San took away his mother's soul, Long Chen's emotions slowly began to calm down. Immediately, his back was drenched in cold sweat. In both his previous and current lives, although his hatred was as deep as the sea, he had always maintained a clear mind and did not fall into the demonic path. But just now, if the Dragon Palace and his sea of consciousness had emitted a mysterious power, he was afraid that he would have fallen into the demonic path. The turbid energy around him receded like the tide. Long Chen was shocked to find that there was a pitch-black seed in the cave abode formed when his Dantian had just stepped into the heaven immortal realm. A demonic seed. Long Chen's expression was somewhat ugly. He knew that this item must have something to do with the Dark Star's forbidden technique. The demonic seed floated motionlessly. Long Chen let out a long sigh of relief. He knew that now was not the time to resolve this matter. He looked at the 5 souls in his hand, then looked at Yu Baigu outside. He sneered and threw the 5 souls to the ground as if they were trash. Although these 5 people were also in the heaven immortal realm, they were no threat to him. The moment the 5 souls landed, they immediately erased the star patterns on their left arms and disappeared. Yu Baigu looked at the 5 souls in the outside world and stared coldly at Long Chen. The day the Battle of the Blazing Suns ends is the day you die. At this moment, there was only killing intent in Yu Baigu's heart. Once again, he threw the order to transcend the ruler to the back of his mind. Long Chen sneered, but he did not look at Yu Baigu. Because he knew that when he left the land of the Blazing Suns, the entire heaven would undergo earth-shaking changes. And this 10th heaven was not in his eyes at all. Buzz. 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 Perhaps it was because the 5 souls had left, only Long Chen was left here. The inscriptions in the sky suddenly shone brightly, and a complicated pattern outlined an array diagram. As the array diagram rotated, everyone watched the scene in Long Chen's palace change rapidly. The palace was hundreds of thousands of miles wide, and it was built with heavy meteorite ore on all sides, but there was an inscription at the top, as if deliberately letting everyone see it. But now, the heavy meteorite ore walls on all sides disappeared, as if Long Chen was already in an open field. However, the inscriptions were still there, and an ancient stele slowly condensed in front of Long Chen from bottom to top. Domain stele shadow. This is the last level. As long as this person walks 100 meters in front of the stele, he can leave his name on the stele. In the past, every Battle of the Blazing Suns had at least 7 or even 9 levels, but today there is only the 5th level. This Long Chen is really a rare person in 1,000 years. Lower your voice, even if he is in front, I'm afraid he won't survive today, countless people were discussing. This Battle of the Steel made everyone look at Long Chen with new eyes. However, everyone also knew that he had angered Yu Baigu. In the 10th heaven, angering a ruler powerhouse would only lead to death in the end. Long Chen stood 100 meters away from the stele and stared at it. This stele was illusory and was definitely not a real thing, but condensed from laws. The huge stone stele had 6 sharp pyramid-like surfaces, and at the sharpest point, there was a blood-red color that did not dissipate. Long Chen knew that it was a drop of blood. In his previous life, Long Chen had seen the stele with his own eyes. This drop of blood, even a ruler, did not know its origin. If the ruler in his previous life wanted to obtain the Primal Chaos Golden Codex the most, then, the most unfathomable thing in the world was this stele. At the bottom of the stele, names appeared one after another. These people were the strongest chosen from the 10 Heaven Star Children. Long Chen casually looked at these names. There were at least 1,000 of them, and the higher one went, the fewer the number of names. In other words, the Battle of the Blazing Suns had been held 100 times. The Battle of the Blazing Suns, which happened once every 100 years, had been going on for more than 10,000 years. However, these people's names were in the most inconspicuous place on the stele, almost less than an inch off the ground. Perhaps only Long Chen could see them at such a close distance. Chapter 619. Past and present. The Battle of the Blazing Suns was different every time. Only the last stage was about leaving one's name on the domain stele. However, there had never been a case where only one person had reached this stage. The last stage was 100 meters away from the domain stele. Those who could cross the 100 meters could leave their name on the domain stele. At this moment, everyone in the spectators' stands of the 4 heavenly cities couldn't help but discuss it. This was because someone had once used 100 days to get close enough to leave their name on the domain tablet. Even the fastest person took a month to do so. This Long Chen's talent is something I've never seen in my life. When he broke through the barrier, it was as if he didn't see anything. He swallowed spiritual energy like a whale swallowing water. 10 days is enough. That's not true. Perhaps you don't know. However, the previous Blazing Sun clan had a history with our clan. According to their clan members, this last stage doesn't test one's talent and strength, but one's Tao heart. That's right. I've also heard that although this 100-meter area seems simple, it's actually difficult to move an inch. If you force yourself to take a step, you'll destroy your Tao heart and have no hope in life. Above the Sky Palace, 5 souls stood in front of Yu Baigu, trembling in fear. Yu Baigu stared at them and didn't have any intention of looking at Long Chen. Perhaps in his heart, Long Chen was already a dead man. Bang! 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 Rays of light shot out from Yu Baigu's hand and landed on the 5 souls. Their bodies quickly condensed on top of their souls, but there was a bit of ghostly aura in their bodies. Yu Baigu said coldly, "Although I can condense your bodies for you, you'll have no hope of stepping into the sovereign realm in this life. There's a powerful spatial barrier in the 10 heavens. I heard that there's a disturbance in the various heavens for some reason. I want you to seal the 10 heavens barrier. It shouldn't attract attention. I'll activate it after I kill Long Chen." As Yu Baigu's voice fell, his dozen or so sons appeared in front of him one by one, but there was a hint of worry in their eyes. The 10 heavens had nothing to do with each other. However, everyone knew that there were more sovereigns in the first heaven, and there were even existences that surpassed the Nirvana realm. Sealing off the heaven domain barrier was a great taboo. This was because once the barrier of the heaven region was sealed, it was equivalent to being temporarily separated from the other 9 regions. Even sovereigns would not be able to descend. "Just killing Long Chen, isn't this method too?" one of them asked in a low voice. Yu Baigu coldly snorted and said, "Over the years, the dominators of the 6 paths and that person have been manipulating the 10 heavens. I think it's time to stop. Hurry up and scram. Do as I say." Long Chen is not as simple as you think. Otherwise, I wouldn't have let him live until today. The dozen or so people no longer dared to anger Yu Baigu and immediately returned to the depths of the heavenly palace. Yu Baigu turned around and looked at Long Chen. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. Since he wanted to seal the heavenly region's barrier, he had to act first and report later. He didn't care about the ruler's order to kill Long Chen. If Long Chen was still alive, he would die in his hands one day. At this moment, Long Chen's eyes were closed, as if he was resting before he set foot on this 100-meter area. The people who were watching from all directions were unprecedentedly quiet. They all noticed Long Chen's current state, as if they were afraid of disturbing him. Buzz. At this moment, Long Chen opened his eyes. His deep eyes were as bright and calm as the stars. At this moment, Long Chen moved. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. The moment Long Chen moved, the crowd was in an uproar. His hands were behind his back. His feet seemed to be stepping on mountains and rivers, but also seemed to be walking on flat ground. He didn't stop at all. In the blink of an eye, he had crossed 30 meters. 30 meters away, Long Chen's footsteps paused. Because at this moment, the world in front of him changed rapidly. He saw Qing Xian die in front of him again. His family was destroyed because of the Li family's hostility. Long Chen shook his head. Everything that happened in this life had already disappeared. He moved again. Countless figures flashed around him. Some were people he had killed, and some were things he had experienced that shook his Tao heart. but his heart was as hard as a rock. He had lived 2 different lives, so his Tao heart was indestructible. How is this possible? How long has it been? It hasn't even been 30 breaths, but he's already crossed 40 meters. Who was the one who said it would take him at least a month? I think this guy won't even need 2 hours. Could he have been possessed by a ruler? Otherwise, how could he have such a Tao heart? How old is he? 60 meters. My God, this battle of the blazing suns is unheard of. 60 meters. Longchen stopped again. This time, Yi Hailan appeared in front of him. Other than his mother and Qing Xian, she was the 3rd woman in his life. He saw her marrying into the Li family in the ancient north. In the end, she was depressed for the rest of her life and awakened a 1,000 severance body. He saw her being surrounded by countless people. Her white clothes were like blood, and she turned into a red spider lily. Longchen sighed. His right hand unconsciously reached out. His heart felt like it was being twisted. Buzz. Just as Longchen reached out, his body suddenly trembled. A dragon's roar in his mind pulled him out of the illusion. Longchen took a deep breath and then spat it out fiercely. He said calmly, "In this life, no matter what, I will not let you down." Yi Hailan had Yi Hailan's pride, but no matter what Yi Hailan chose, he had already made up his mind. Longchen slowly retracted his right hand. In his heart, he felt a trace of reverence for the domain steel. His right hand had already decayed like a piece of dead wood. If it weren't for that dragon's roar, Longchen would have sunk into the illusion. His ending would have been hard to predict. Swoosh swoosh. Longchen moved again. In the blink of an eye, he was already standing in front of the domain steel. There was still a meter of space beside him. But Longchen was still unable to cross this 1 meter. Because the person in front of him was a transcendent ruler. This was his previous life's master, an existence who had toyed with him in the palm of his hand and erased everything about him. Everyone looked at each other. They didn't know why Longchen had stopped at the 99th meter. But in the next moment, Longchen's eyes suddenly turned cold. He shouted, "In this life, I will kill you to establish my Tao heart." Longchen punched out, and there was actually thunder that filled the sky. The illusion in front of him cracked inch by inch. His feet were already standing in front of the domain steel. This attack didn't damage his Tao heart. Instead, it was unprecedentedly resolute. In this life, he wanted to ascend to the throne of a great emperor. He wanted to pry into the secrets beyond the 10 directions celestial domains. He also wanted to take revenge for his past life. Standing in front of the domain steel, Longchen looked at the tiny names on his feet. Longchen raised his head and laughed. Chapter 620. The rulers fear standing at the top of the sky. Everyone stared at Longchen, their hands clenched tightly. No one knew what kind of illusion Longchen had seen at the last step. But everyone knew that he was the first person to walk past the 100-meter mark and still stand, under the domain steel. Every time the 10th heaven's blazing sun reached the end, they would crawl on the ground. Otherwise, all their names wouldn't be left at the bottom of the domain steel. The highest name only reached Longchen's ankle. These names were all the blazing suns of the 10th heaven. However, Longchen stood in place. No matter how the domain steel flashed, he didn't move. It was as if the domain steel's pressure was useless to him. There was no awe in his eyes, only arrogance. Under everyone's gaze, Longchen rose from the ground. Just as he said, he didn't want to bow down to others. 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters. Rumble for a time, the entire 10th heaven was filled with thunder, and countless purple lightning bolts soared into the sky. Even Yu Baigu's face was full of shock, and he had no choice but to move the palace away from the battlefield. At the same time, all the stars participating in the battle of the blazing sun stopped and looked at the sky in a daze. In the 10th heaven, the battlefield of the 10 blazing suns actually had a domain steel phantom. Directly above the phantom, there was a person holding a sword. Who was this? Could it be that group of monsters from the first heaven? Impossible, even the first heaven's name has never been left more than 1 meter away from the domain stele, and this is too fast. We are still in the 5th level, but someone has already left their name on the domain stele, and it's at the top. A true blazing sun is about to appear in the 10th heaven. If this person leaves his name at the top of the domain stele, he can be called a rare genius. Countless exclamations spread throughout the heavens. The Battle of the Blazing Suns has been held hundreds of times, but no one has ever left their name more than 1 meter away. If they knew that Longchen came from the 10th heaven, they would be even more shocked because everyone's name could only be at the bottom of the domain stele. Sword light surged, Longchen used his sword as a brush, and thunder roared as he moved. With every stroke, the domain stele's countless rule force began to vibrate. The drop of blood at the top of the domain stele burned like a flame, Longchen. As Longchen's sword light fell, everyone in the 10 directions heaven domain knew about the illusory domain stele. At this moment, the 9th heaven, 8th heaven, 3rd, and the 1st heaven, 6 stalwart figures, all of them had a look of reverence. They were the 6 divine beast war souls. At this very moment, the 6 of them were actually standing in front of their respective region steles. Each of them was a ruler powerhouse. The purple lightning that filled the sky fell silent, but Longchen still stood at the peak of the illusory domain tablet. When the 2 words Longchen were left on the domain stele of the 1st heaven seemed to be attracted, blooming with multicolored light. Then, divine light fell from above like a waterfall, crossing the 9 heavens and landing on the domain stele phantom. Then, everyone in the 10th heaven, led by Ubaigu, watched Longchen being enveloped by the domain stele phantom. Domain stele Dao imparting. This was the reason why countless stars in the 10 heavens competed for the title of blazing sun. Longchen's eyes slowly closed, and then his whole body was wrapped in a continuous stream of multicolored light. Finally, with the domain stele phantom as the center, it completely condensed into a huge ball of light. This ball of light was like a cocoon, in the 1st heaven, next to the real domain stele. An old man with a sage-like demeanor saw Longchen's name and the domain stele Dao imparting. His eyes were full of excitement. The light in the transcendent ruler's eyes disappeared in an instant, and then he looked at the 2 souls and 7 spirits in his hand and said indifferently, "Since he and the Nether Ghost ruler can no longer coexist, then let them have a good fight. When the time comes, I will show mercy and accept him as my disciple and give him the 10th heaven. The body of a great emperor, the heavenly dragon Vane, he can help me find the primal chaos golden codex and step into the great emperor realm." Then, the transcendent ruler's voice became lower and lower, but his face became more and more ferocious. In the end, he stared at the vast starry sky outside the 1st heaven like a ghost. The 10th heaven. Ubaigu looked at the sky that had calmed down and the multicolored light cocoon condensed by the domain stele phantom. His brows were deeply furrowed, and his face was extremely solemn. With the domain stele Dao imparting, if one's potential was enough, it was not impossible to step into the ruler realm. Everyone in the 10 heavens knew about the power of the domain stele. Some people even directly reached the peak of the heavenly immortal realm from the origin immortal realm because of the domain stele Dao immortal's teachings, only 1 step away from the ruler realm. At this moment, for some reason, Ubaigu felt a faint sense of fear in his heart. The potential Longchen showed in this battle of the blazing suns was too terrifying. At this moment, Longchen was at the early stage of the heavenly immortal realm. He had at least a 50% chance of stepping into the Nirvana ruler realm. Once he became a Nirvana ruler, he could condense his divine sense into a Yang soul and replace the heavenly Tao with his own divine sense. If Longchen really reached this realm, even Ubaigu wouldn't dare to say that he could easily defeat Longchen. In fact, this was also the reason why Ubaigu stayed in the 10th heaven. Because he cultivated evil arts, his divine sense was still as vast as the sea, and he couldn't transform into a Yang soul. In this life, he could only be a Nirvana ruler, and it was impossible for him to reach the Yin-Yang ruler realm. Seeing Longchen receiving the domain stele's teachings, Ubaigu coldly said, "Gather all the soldiers of the heavenly palace in the 10th heaven. The upper 3 temples, the middle 3 temples, and the lower 3 temples, All heavenly immortals and above are to follow orders and surround the 4 heavenly cities. Open the treasury of the heavenly palace. Anyone who participates in this battle will be rewarded. Ubaigu constantly ordered the old beggar covered in talismans behind him. The old beggar was stunned on the spot when he heard this. He even thought that he had misheard and subconsciously asked, "My lord, why do you have to do this? This person is just a heavenly immortal. So what if he's receiving the domain steel's teachings? Do you really want to use the power of the entire 10th heaven?" Ubaigu shook his head and said solemnly, "You are still a heavenly immortal. You don't know how terrifying it is once a heavenly immortal steps into the Nirvana ruler realm." This person didn't fear the late stage of heavenly immortal when he was just an earth immortal. After stepping into the heavenly immortal realm, he has the strength to crush all heavenly immortal powerhouses. He is almost as terrifying as those from the first heaven. If he steps into the ruler realm, even if I win, I'm afraid I will have to pay a price, not to mention this person must be killed quickly. Otherwise, I'm afraid that the transcendent ruler will take action. Ubaigu seemed to have a lot of trust in this old beggar talisman master and told him what he thought. After hearing this, the old beggar's eyes flashed with a haze, and he said coldly, "I am willing to engrave a large array for my lord. Even if this person steps into the ruler realm, he will be suppressed." Chapter 621. A city full of men. Ubaigu himself has reached the 3rd tribulation of the Nirvana realm, but his actions at this moment stunned countless people. The great clans of the heavenly cities around the illusory domain steel were all dismissed. At the same time, Ubaigu issued an order in the name of the heavenly palace, summoning all the powerhouses from the 9 great palaces of the 10th heaven. Isn't Lord Uraith making a fuss over a minor issue? Even if this person stepped into the ruler realm, he shouldn't have such a lineup. I'm afraid that with this order, the 4 heavenly cities will be filled with heavenly immortals in a short time. It's a pity that Long Chen's talent is really rare. At least in the 10th heaven, I have never seen such a character appear in the Battle of the Blazing Suns. He can only blame himself for provoking someone he shouldn't have. Since ancient times, there have been many geniuses, but not many have survived. More and more people withdrew from the 4 heavenly cities, but a group of people quickly arrived. The person in the lead was wearing a robe with a crescent moon. The Bright Moon Ancient Clan. The leader of the Bright Moon Ancient Clan was only at the intermediate stage of the Earth Immortal Realm. This person rushed straight to the bottom of the Heavenly Palace. Many people recognized the Bright Moon Ancient Clan. This clan used to call the wind and summon the rain in the Death Hall, but it declined on the first day Long Chen arrived. The power of the Holy Sword was still vivid in everyone's mind. The leader of the Bright Moon Ancient Clan stood under the Heavenly Palace and reported to Lord Uraith. "Lord, we saw the Holy Sword in Long Chen's hand. This sword is now in Sword Saint City." Sword Saint City? Lord Uraith stood above the Heavenly Palace, his originally calm face somewhat gloomy. Long Chen once discussed the Tao with Lu Taishu in Sword Saint City, and the two were old friends. Lu Taishu is the 2nd ruler powerhouse in the 10th heaven. Although Lu Taishu once said that he would never step out of Sword Saint City, you and I should go and see him in person. Lord Uraith said to the Beggar Talisman Master. The Beggar Talisman Master shook his head and replied, "Lord, I have a request. If this matter is successful, even if Lu Taishu comes, he won't be able to save Long Chen. What's the matter?" Ubaigu asked. "Massacre the city." The talismans on the old beggar's body trembled, and a ghastly smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. Ubaigu didn't even ask any questions. He just said casually, "You can mobilize the soldiers of the 9 heavenly palaces as you please. It's just a massacre." The people of the Bright Moon Ancient Clan who had been standing under the Heavenly Palace were now drenched in cold sweat. Just massacring the city, a single sentence from Ubaigu would cause countless people to die. As Ubaigu's voice fell, the corners of his mouth revealed a sinister smile. He grabbed at the air with his right hand, and the giant baby statue on the left side of the Heavenly Palace turned into a cloud of black gas and fell into his hand. Within the black gas, there seemed to be countless ghost babies crying and screaming, which made one's hair stand on end. Ubaigu looked at the Earth celestial stage of the Hauyua ancient clan, who was shivering, and said with a smile, "Take this thing and get the holy sword back for me." Before the person from the Bright Moon ancient clan could answer, the black gas fell into his hand. "Yes, yes, we will obey the order of the Overlord." The Earth celestial stage cultivator of the Bright Moon ancient clan led his clansmen to retreat quickly. It seemed that he was very afraid of the Overlord of the Dark Ghost. Seeing the Bright Moon ancient clan leave, Ubaigu no longer felt uneasy. Within the black gas formed by the ghost babies, there was a ghost left behind by a transcendent ruler. This thing was similar to the ghost streamer in that day. It could suppress holy weapons. After doing all this, Ubaigu looked at the illusion of the domain steel in the center of the four cities again. In the middle of the illusion, there was a cocoon condensed by countless rays of light. He could even vaguely see Long Chen's figure in it. "Massacre the city. I want this person to be consigned to eternal damnation the moment he leaves this place," Ubaigu said sternly. The Bright Moon ancient clan went to Sword Saint City, while the old beggar led 2,000 heaven celestial stage powerhouses and left the 4 heavenly cities. As for Long Chen, no one cared about him, because everyone knew that he was going to die without a doubt. As for when he would be able to complete the domain steel instruction, no one guessed. The duration of the domain steel instruction varied. The longest recorded time was nearly 10 years, and the shortest recorded time was 1 year. The 10th heaven began to become turbulent because of Ubaigu. Massacring a city was never an unfamiliar word in the 10th heaven. For example, when the Nether Ghost ruler entered the Celestial Palace, he slaughtered 32 cities filled with ordinary people. That was how the Celestial Palace came to be. The original Heavenly Palace wasn't like this. Bones, ghosts, dead babies, the current Heavenly Palace was built in this way. After the reconstruction of the Heavenly Palace, the 10th heaven experienced more than 10 massacres. However, the massacred cities were still inhabited by ordinary people, not the major ancient clans. These more than 10 massacres were for his more than 10 sons to reach adulthood. However, he had never massacred a city before. Now, the major ancient clans were in danger. In just a month, 3 cities were massacred, and even some of the major ancient clans were exterminated. Outside the Big Dipper city, the Big Dipper clan saw the old beggar covered in talismans coming with thousands of heaven celestial stage powerhouses. They were all trembling. Only a woman stood on the city wall. This person was the Big Dipper Phoenix. The Big Dipper Phoenix looked at the incoming army and laughed loudly, watching the Big Dipper clan fleeing in all directions. Her laughter became louder and louder. Big Dipper Phoenix, the daughter of the Big Dipper clan's patriarch, her mother died in childbirth. In the Big Dipper clan, men were superior to women. Women were inferior to men, and it was difficult for them to achieve anything in their lives. When she was 6 years old, her father adopted a man from a branch family and became her elder brother. Since then, she hadn't seen her father for 10 years. No one knew how many hardships Big Dipper Phoenix had suffered along the way. They only knew that when she became famous, she killed her elder brother. The powerhouses of the Big Dipper clan sat on the ground in horror. Some even hid under their beds and trembled. She, Big Dipper Phoenix, stood up. She just wanted to tell the world, to tell her father that she, Big Dipper Phoenix, would never lose to any man. Especially the men of the Big Dipper clan. Big Dipper clan, a major ancient clan, all the men in the city are acting like women. Big Dipper Phoenix jumped down from the city wall and rushed into the army. Who said women are inferior to men? I, Big Dipper Phoenix, am willing to die with my blade. Immortal power was like a tide, but it disappeared in an instant. Big Dipper Phoenix died. Everyone in the Big Dipper clan was stunned. The army entered the city. Blood dyed every inch of Big Dipper City red. Everyone's souls were collected by the old beggar's talisman formation. However, a trace of surprise appeared on his face. Big Dipper Phoenix's soul had disappeared. It had disappeared without a trace. The old beggar slowly looked in the direction of the 4 sky cities. He didn't know why, but he felt that Big Dipper Phoenix's 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls had all left in that direction. But what was there? Apart from the 4 sky cities, it seemed that only the illusory region still remained. And Longchen inside. Chapter 622. Don't need to die too much. The 10th heaven had never been so peaceful before. Every time the Battle of the Blazing Suns ended, there was no intention to hold the Blazing Sun celebration. Except for the 7 major cities, there are ghosts crying day and night. It seems that all the cities in the entire 10th heaven have become dead cities. All the great families of the heaven domain had become turtles hiding in their shells, fearing that this massacre would happen to them. No one thought that just to deal with Longchen, who won the title of Blazing Sun, Yubaigu would use the peak combat power of the entire heaven domain. There was even an evil array. Evil array was a strange term known to all the great families in the 10th heaven. Once, when another ghost ruler rose, it made everyone tremble in fear, and its user was none other than the mysterious array seed. It was this beggar-like old man covered in talismans. This person had been by Yubaigu's side since before he became a ruler. Now, more than a month had passed since Longchen received the domain Steel's Dao instruction, and the original 5 heaven cities had long been empty. Instead, it was surrounded by 7 other large cities. Unlike the deathly stillness of the 4 sky cities, these 7 cities were extraordinarily noisy. If one listened carefully, one would be able to hear endless roars and sorrowful cries. Above the 7 cities, pitch-black death chi soared into the sky, almost covering the sky. It was as if 7 ghosts were eyeing the light cocoon in the center of the domain steel. Inside the light cocoon, Longchen was suspended in the air in a very strange posture, surrounded by countless rays of light. Each ray of light was like a spring rain brushing past his body. In Longchen's Dantian, the cave mansion was shining like a star. It was something he produced with the Sumeru root and the Earth Immortal Foundation establishment method of the ancient era. Longchen's divine sense was extremely clear at this moment, and he could even feel every trace of spiritual chi passing through his body. What grade is this domain steel? It doesn't contain spiritual power, but a power I have never seen before. It's not even the innate purple chi of the heaven domain. Longchen muttered to himself. During this time, his divine sense had been trying to see through the domain steel, wanting to know what mysteries it held. A sovereign. This item could even allow one to enter the sovereign realm. This was something that no one dared to imagine. In Longchen's previous life, he had used a full 50 years to reach the heavenly immortal stage, even though he had cultivated with the body of a great emperor without any obstacles. However, stepping into the ruler realm from the heavenly immortal realm had taken him 30 years. In the 10 directions celestial domain, there were countless cultivators and even heaven immortal realm cultivators. However, there were less than 200 sovereigns. Most of them had just stepped into the Nirvana realm. In reality, strictly speaking, these people could only be called Nirvana realm cultivators and not rulers. Only the masters of the 10 great celestial palaces were called true rulers. Anyone who could control a celestial realm was a ruler. Nirvana realm, Yin-Yang realm, 6 paths realm, heaven-reaching realm. Nirvana realm cultivators were extremely rare in the 10 directions celestial domain. The world only knew that the 10 great sovereigns had cultivations that surpassed the heavenly immortal realm, which was why they referred to those above the heavenly immortal realm as sovereigns. In fact, except for the Nirvana realm expert Yubaigu in the 10th heaven, the true rulers of the other 9 heavens are at least at the Yin-Yang realm. Longchen shook his head and didn't think about it anymore. He had never seen or heard of such a strange power before. However, it was this mysterious power in the domain steel that allowed his cultivation to continuously increase. He even felt that even if he didn't have the body of a great emperor, he could still break through the barrier. Even the comprehension of heaven and earth could be born out of thin air. In just over a month, he had already reached the 4th level of the heavenly immortal realm. Stepping into the 4th level of the heavenly immortal realm from the 1st level of the heavenly immortal realm seemed to be nothing. However, if this happened to anyone, it could be considered a rare opportunity that only appeared once in a few hundred years. The higher the realm of cultivation, the greater the amount of spiritual energy needed. To reach each realm of the heavenly immortal realm, one would need years or even decades of accumulation. The stronger one's talent and physique, the more accumulation they would need, and the stronger the barrier they would have to face would be. It would even make one feel despair. Although Longchen didn't need to face the barrier, the amount of spiritual energy he needed had definitely reached a shocking level. In his previous life, although he had reached the nirvana realm from the heavenly immortal realm in just a few decades, he had established a divine nation and ruled over a region. However, in a few decades, he had almost traveled to every secret realm from the 10th to the 8th heaven. And now, all of this seemed to be happening naturally. He didn't even turn his body. Why am I here? Longchen shook his head and laughed. While feeling that his cultivation was still increasing, a woman's voice came from beside him. Although the woman's voice was a little uneasy, it was very clear. Big Dipper Phoenix. This was a name known to all the ancient clans in the 10th heaven. She jumped over the city wall and said, "Who said that women are inferior to men? I, Big Dipper Phoenix, am willing to die with my sword." Who knows how many men were shocked? If it weren't for her words, Xianjinzi wouldn't have taken more than a month to complete the massacre of the city. But no one knew that Big Dipper Phoenix was also in the phantom of the domain steel. Longchen looked at Big Dipper Phoenix with a slight smile and said calmly, "I can feel that this domain steel can let me step into the sovereign realm. After stepping into the sovereign realm, I want to establish a divine nation and find a general." Longchen's voice was very calm, as if he was talking about an insignificant matter. If it weren't for the phantom of the domain steel at this moment, Big Dipper Phoenix would have thought that he wanted to build a private school and find a teacher. But when Big Dipper Phoenix's divine soul looked at Longchen's eyes, she was stunned. This was the second time she had spoken so close to Longchen, but she knew that this man was different. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been the first to withdraw after Longchen broke through that day. "I only have a divine soul now, what is there to fear? If you can become a sovereign and establish a divine nation, I will follow you." Establishing a divine nation was not rare in the 10 heavens. Before the ghost ruler, the 10th heaven was controlled by a sovereign who had established a divine nation. Do you know what the situation outside is like now? I'm afraid that when you leave this phantom, it will be the day you die. Big Dipper Phoenix looked at Longchen's indifferent appearance and couldn't help but ask. Seeing that Longchen didn't seem to care at all and didn't even have the intention to ask, Big Dipper Phoenix felt that she had to vent her anger. So, she minded her own business and told Longchen about Yubai's actions in the outside world. "Before my clan was massacred, the ghost ruler gathered all the sky immortals in the 9 palaces here. There's also that Xianjinzi. That person's evil arts and formations are extremely powerful. I'm afraid the 7 great cities are already outside." And when she finished speaking word by word, Longchen merely raised his eyebrows. Then Longchen said something she would remember for the rest of her life. Chapter 623. Nirvana, Sun Spirit. Inside the phantom of the steel, time seemed to have lost all meaning. After Longchen and Big Dipper Phoenix had a simple conversation, they didn't say anything else. Every day, Longchen would carve a divine light on her divine soul. During these days, she also personally witnessed Longchen's cultivation improving day by day. Especially the cave in his dantian. She even felt that the power absorbed in this cave had exceeded the limit of the heavenly immortal realm. At this moment, Longchen's dantian cave was as bright as a star. In this phantom of the steel, she could clearly see that there was a divine fetus inside the cave. Rumble. On this day, Big Dipper Phoenix looked at Longchen in a daze. In the entire 10th heaven, night was replaced by day. Although the 7 ghost cities surrounding the 4 heaven cities were still ferocious, there was no sound of death. In the middle of the day, in the middle of the scorching sun, there were countless streams of fire rolling down, just like a lit oil lamp falling down, the flames surging up along with the oil. But at this moment, the flames fell from the scorching sun. The flames spread across thousands of miles like a waterfall falling from the 9 heavens. The place where it fell was where Longchen was. Puff, puff, puff. With the phantom of the steel as the center, the grass and trees turned into ashes, and the earth turned into yellow sand. However, in the next breath, all things recovered, the grass grew, and the orioles flew, in a radius of 1,000,000 miles, whether it was demon beasts or cultivators, they all crawled on the ground. Only those in the heavenly immortal realm could barely stand. When they saw the world around them change in an instant, their faces were filled with terror. Everyone said to themselves in a trembling voice, a sovereign powerhouse has appeared. At this moment, in addition to Yu Baigu and Sword Saint Lu Taishu, the third sovereign powerhouse in the 10th heaven had appeared. Yu Baigu stepped on the top of the heavenly palace, appearing here at an unknown time. Behind Yu Baigu, above the huge heavenly palace, there were countless heavenly immortal powerhouses. Xianzhenzi was also standing at the center of the intersection of the 7 ghost cities. This place was also directly above the phantom of the steel. At this moment, Xianzhenzi had 7 heads on his body, which was extremely terrifying. The talismans on his body had all disappeared. Xianzhenzi looked at the white bones from afar and said in a deep voice, "Don't worry, my lord. When this person walks out of here today, he will die." As soon as Xianzhenzi's voice fell, the firepower that filled the sky poured down and fell into the phantom of the domain tablet. To be precise, it fell on Longchen. At this moment, Longchen's body was burning with raging flames, Nirvana realm. Once one stepped into this realm, one would become the ruler of the world. Compared to this false reputation, Longchen cared more about the Nirvana realm's tempering of the soul. The Big Dipper Phoenix stood there in a daze. This was the first time she had seen someone step into the sovereign realm. The fiery waterfall from the blazing sun completely disappeared from Longchen's body. This scene made the Big Dipper Phoenix feel very strange. It was like a basin of water being poured into a handful of yellow sand. The yellow sand did not move, but the water disappeared without a trace. But soon, she knew where the fire had gone. It was in Longchen's eyes. To be precise, it was in Longchen's spiritual sea. Rumble. At this moment, the Big Dipper Phoenix's soul trembled as if it was in a boundless sea. This sea was Longchen's spiritual sea. She had never seen such a majestic spiritual sea. It even terrified her. "Don't be afraid, just let go of your body and mind. This Nirvana flame is just building my Yan spirit. Using one's spirit to replace the Tao of heaven and earth was called Nirvana. Once in Nirvana, one's lifespan could reach 5,000 years. The flames in Longchen's eyes burned brighter and brighter, but the pressure of his spiritual sea grew weaker and weaker. In less than 100 breaths, the Big Dipper Phoenix felt her soul lighten and could no longer feel Longchen's spiritual sea. She didn't understand why Longchen had clearly reached the sovereign realm, but the power of his spiritual sea seemed to have completely disappeared. Longchen seemed to see her confusion and smiled faintly. Yang spirit. When the spiritual sea transforms, it becomes the Yang spirit. Take another look at my eyes. The Big Dipper Phoenix looked over and through Longchen's eyes, she saw Longchen's Niwen Palace. However, this place no longer had the boundless spiritual sea. There was only one god left. It was another Longchen. The Big Dipper Phoenix felt her lips go dry. She had only taken one look at this god, but she felt her soul was about to shatter. At this moment, she finally understood the difference between the heavenly immortal realm and the sovereign realm. I used this domain steel's indescribable power to reconstruct your soul. Now, I'll use this Nirvana flame to refine your body. As Longchen's voice fell, streams of fire appeared in his eyes to refine the Big Dipper Phoenix's body. The flesh and blood around the Big Dipper Phoenix's soul started to condense at a speed visible to the naked eye. Finally, a perfect body appeared in front of Longchen. Clothes! The Big Dipper Phoenix's face was red as her hands covered the important parts of her body. Longchen coughed lightly and threw the clothes into the Big Dipper Phoenix's hands. Then, he said, "You're my first divine general. Your name will be Big Dipper." The Big Dipper Phoenix turned around and put on the clothes. She glared at Longchen fiercely before nodding. Longchen didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw this scene. The Big Dipper Phoenix clearly didn't know what a divine general meant. Under normal circumstances, a Nirvana realm sovereign could only use the name of the sun god to take in 5 divine generals. In Longchen's previous life, the firmament god nation he established only had 15 divine generals. Let's go. It's time to leave. The 10th heaven is where I'll establish my god nation. Longchen said. The Big Dipper Phoenix said solemnly, you've just stepped into the sovereign realm. That Ubaigu has been famous for a long time. Plus, there's so much preparation, with your current realm, it shouldn't be difficult to escape. Longchen shook his head and smiled, you're trying to say that if I fight head-on, I'll definitely die, right? Do you know why Ubaigu will definitely lose? It's because he took the wrong path. He doesn't have a sun god, so he doesn't have a divine general, let alone establish a god nation. If he leaves the 10th heaven, I'm afraid that any sovereign of the same realm can defeat him. Longchen paused. As for his preparations, other than these 7 cities, I don't care about anything else. Because I'm also prepared. After Longchen finished speaking, he didn't wait for the Big Dipper Phoenix to reply and left the domain stele. The moment he stepped out of the domain stele, a long sword soared into the sky from Sword Saint City, turned into a rainbow, and disappeared into the horizon. On the Sword Mountain, a broken sword transformed into a human form and stopped attacking for the first time. In front of him was Lu Taishu. Jianshir-san stared at Lu Taishu and said, let's call a truce today. Why? Lu Taishu shouted. Master has given the order. After speaking, Jianshir-san once again transformed into a broken sword and soared into the sky. You and I have a sword duel. No one's life can be cut off. Seeing Jianshir-san leave, Lu Taishu actually soared into the sky. Chapter 624. Nirvana Flame Domain. Ancient Desolate Land. Above the desolate domain, large-scale teleportation arrays were activated, and everyone who had already formed a war was disappearing from the desolate domain at a speed visible to the naked eye. These teleportation arrays were left behind by Longchen, and many of the materials were brought by Yan Mei from the Heaven Domain. They were completed a month ago under the leadership of Dongfang Jin of the East Royal Clan. They were waiting for Longchen's order and spatial coordinates. At this moment, Longchen's order had been issued. From today onwards, almost all the people above the Saint Realm and the entire ancient desolate land had left. Their goal was the 10th heaven. The 10th heaven. The center of the 4 heaven cities, the place where the blazing suns used to fight. The moment Longchen stepped out, the phantom of the domain stele disappeared without a trace. Buzz. The moment Longchen appeared, he saw Baigu standing at the top of the heavenly palace in the sky. Their eyes met, and Baigu's face was extremely gloomy. Just as he didn't want to see, Longchen had really reached the Nirvana realm. Today, no matter what, you will die. Baigu ordered, and the heavenly immortal experts above the heaven palace spread out to every corner. Before they could even make a move, the ghostly creatures above the 7 ghost cities were all engulfed in black smoke and rose into the sky. The black smoke rushed towards Longchen from 7 directions, and each one was like a dark cloud that covered the sky. Longchen looked up, and above him was Xianzhenzi. Xianzhenzi's whole body was covered in runes, and there were no less than thousands of them. He originally looked like an old beggar, but at this moment, he was unprecedentedly dignified, and his whole body was emitting an evil aura that made people's heart palpitate. Longchen stood in place, and the Big Dipper Phoenix stood behind him. Longchen stared at Xianzhenzi and the Black Death aura in the sky, and said indifferently, with the resentment of the 7 cities as the foundation, and the 7 ghosts of the Heaven Domain ancient clan as the 7 array cores, this array is not bad. Countless heavenly immortals above the Heaven Palace looked at each other when they saw this scene. No one expected Longchen's first sentence to be this. Xianzhenzi suddenly frowned. Longchen was too calm. Xianzhenzi faintly felt a little uneasy, and then shook his head fiercely, and said coldly, I didn't expect your excellency to be so knowledgeable about array formations. Then you should know that even if you become a ruler, your soul will be destroyed. Ghost City Soul Locking Formation, open. Xianzhenzi didn't dare to hesitate. Because Long Chen's calm, he became more and more uneasy. Following his command, the celestial power around his body actually gushed out at a speed visible to the naked body. Then, it actually turned pitch black, connecting with the aura of death and ghosts gushing out of the 7 cities. Immortals. Xian Demon Death Immortals 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 Devil Immortals Immortals Immortal Immortals Realm Immortals and Immortals Immortal Experts. 7 chains formed a cage with Longchen as the center. Black wind blew in all directions. If one looked carefully, they would find that the cage formed by the chains was full of ferocious faces and countless inscriptions. All the heaven immortals felt their scalps go numb. Among those ghosts, there were 7 heaven domain ancient clans and people from the 7 cities. Under such biting, ordinary heaven immortals wouldn't be able to hold on for even a breath. Even Yu Baigu's pupils shrank, and he stared at Xianzhenzi. He knew that after today's battle, Xianzhenzi's life would be in danger. Yu Baigu was relieved. In his opinion, although Longchen had stepped into the Nirvana realm, this array had the effect of destroying his soul. The soul of someone who had just broken through to the Nirvana realm and formed a yang spirit was at its weakest at this moment. Bang, bang, bang. The sounds caused the space to rumble, and Yu Baigu's gaze was pulled away from Xianzhenzi. Then everyone looked at Longchen and the Big Dipper Phoenix. The loud rumble was accompanied by rays of golden light that tore the cage formed by the 7 chains apart. Poochie, poochie. As the cage cracked inch by inch, Xianzhenzi in the sky began to spit out blood, and his eyes were filled with shock. How is this possible? You actually created the Nirvana Fire Realm. Nirvana Fire Realm. Yu Baigu's entire body stiffened, and a deep sense of uneasiness appeared in the depths of his eyes. Nirvana Fire Realm, that was the power of the way of the heavens that few people in the Nirvana realm could condense. Nirvana Realm. Using one's yang spirit to replace the way of the heavens and earth. But there were only a few who could truly condense a realm. Attack, everyone attack, and kill him with me. Yu Baigu's eyes suddenly flashed with a ferocious look as he shouted. At the same time, the 3 ghost baby statues above the heaven palace rushed toward Longchen. The heaven immortals formed a battle formation, and their attacks fell like a torrent. Rumble. Break. With a loud shout, the 7 chains where Longchen was suddenly shattered, and countless ghosts died miserably. Longchen's body seemed to be surrounded by flames, like a scorching sun in the sky, and there seemed to be a god living inside. Where the scorching sun's light fell, the ghosts in the 7 cities were crushed into powder. The attacks that filled the sky poured down from the heaven palace like a tsunami, and fell toward Longchen. Almost all the heaven immortals from the 9 palaces were gathered here, and the power of this attack was evident. 2 torrents seemed to converge in the sky, and the entire space shook continuously. At this moment, Longchen was like a soldering iron in the night, and he was instantly annihilated. Is he dead? This person has just stepped into the sovereign realm, and with so many of us attacking at the same time, he will definitely die. A sovereign realm expert, can we really kill a sovereign realm expert? Is he dead? He can only blame himself for being 2. Countless people sighed. They didn't even dare to believe that they had killed a sovereign realm expert. Looking over, they saw that the place where Longchen was originally at was filled with ashes of immortal energy, and the ground within several tens of thousands of kilometers had turned into a deep abyss. Yu Baigu soared into the sky, and pitch-black immortal energy rose around his body. His eyes stared at the abyss. Is he really dead? Yu Baigu, a battle between you and me? Why is there a need for so many people to attack? If you want to kill me today, these people are not enough. A disdainful voice sounded. In the abyss thousands of kilometers away, Longchen soared into the sky. The scorching sun god behind him seemed to be somewhat dispirited. If he had continued to endure the attacks just now, he would have definitely died. However, in front of everyone's eyes, Long Chen's right hand fell from the sky, and inscriptions were carved in the air. A spatial crack that spanned tens of thousands of meters appeared behind him. At the same time, in the sky, 3 sword rays streaked across the horizon like shooting stars and landed behind Long Chen. Disciple has come with Master's holy sword. Greetings. Jian Shisan's broken sword body swayed, and he turned into a human. In front of everyone's eyes, everyone retreated a few steps in a daze. Even Yu Baigu couldn't help but turn sluggish. Chapter 625. The Master's battle outside the space channel. Tens of thousands of people arrived in an instant. Among them, the strongest were only at the early stage of the Earth celestial stage, and there were hundreds of Essence celestial stage cultivators. Most of them were still in the Saint stage. However, they were standing behind Long Chen in an orderly fashion. Yu Baigu looked at this scene and snorted disdainfully. He naturally saw that these people were from the ancient desolate land. But these people were just small fries in his eyes. Saint stage? Tens of thousands of Saint stage cultivators, he could kill them all with just 100 Heaven celestial stage cultivators. The only thing that worried him was the sword Saint Lu Taishu who suddenly appeared. Yu Baigu said coldly, "Lu Taishu, are you going to break your promise and attack me?" Lu Taishu snorted coldly. There was a hint of contempt in his eyes as he looked at Yu Baigu and replied. "This old man said that I will only train in the 10th heaven, so I won't do anything to you. I came here today to save a person's life." "Who?" Yu Baigu asked. Lu Taishu replied, "It's this person. I don't care who wins or loses today, this person must not die." Lu Taishu stared at Jian Shisan and shouted. Yu Baigu's face was a little gloomy, but he had to nod. At this moment, he only wanted to kill Long Chen. If he provoked Lu Taishu, he would simply be digging his own grave. Jian Shisan sneered when he saw Yu Baigu's expression. He said in a deep voice, "With Master here, he can't kill me. This group of ghosts is yours, right? Crooked." As soon as Jian Shisan's voice fell, he waved his hand and slashed out a sword light. The sword light was the ghost baby's energy that Yu Baigu gave to the Haoyu clan that day. Yu Baigu's face was extremely ugly. Jian Shisan actually returned the ghost baby to him intact. This was simply an insult. He never thought that even Long Chen's disciple would be so arrogant. "Kill them. Kill everyone here." Under Yu Baigu's order, tens of thousands of ghosts rushed out from the heavenly palace. The Heaven celestial stage cultivators also rushed towards Long Chen. Long Chen soared into the sky and shouted, "Do you dare to fight me?" Yu Baigu snorted and soared into the sky. He followed closely behind and said in a cold voice, "Arrogant brat, I will teach you a lesson today." Yu Baigu waved his hand, and a pale spine appeared in his hand. The two of them were like a blazing sun and a black fog that soared into the 9 heavens. Below, nearly 10,000 Heaven Immortal Realm experts heaved a sigh of relief when they saw Long Chen fighting alone with Yu Baigu. Long Chen would not be able to last more than 10 moves against all of them and Yu Baigu. However, Long Chen's Nirvana Dominator's power was now rushing into the crowd. There would be countless casualties. Now, their task was indeed much easier. Although there were tens of thousands of soldiers in front of them, these people were just too laughable in front of them. Almost 70% of the Heaven Immortals from the 9 palaces were gathered here. In fact, they did not expect that their core opponent would be a saint. Form the formation. Form the formation. However, under the leadership of Qing Xian, Dongfang Jin, and the others, tens of thousands of people actually turned into a 9-dragon battle formation. Big Dipper Phoenix could not help but be stunned when she saw this. She did not expect these tens of thousands of people to not be afraid at all. In fact, she even saw piety in these people's eyes. Rumble. Countless attacks converged in an instant, and the entire space and earth shook again. Jian Shisan once again turned into a broken sword and rushed into the crowd. Under the blade of the sword, he also merged into the battle formation. Under the blade of the sword, the Heaven Immortal Realm experts also retreated step by step. What's going on? How can these people have such combat power? What kind of battle formation is this? Its grade is much higher than ours. Quick, kill this person who can turn into a sword spirit with all your strength. This person's attack can actually destroy the divine soul. Do you want to die? This person is personally protected by the Sword Saint. Big Dipper Phoenix could not help but widen her eyes when she saw tens of thousands of heaven immortals fighting against tens of thousands of saints. She could not believe that these saints from the ancient desolate land, led by a few earth immortals, could fight against so many heaven immortals. Especially their battle formation, which was far superior to the heavenly domain battle formation. Big Dipper Phoenix entered the battle formation with her sword, and her blood was boiling. However, she soon discovered another thing, and that was that her combat power was far superior to that of an ordinary heaven immortal. Even when she was attacked by the heaven immortals, there was an invisible force around her that helped her block it. Was this the power of a divine general? The three divine beast war souls saw Big Dipper Phoenix from afar, and they frowned. You're our master divine general? Why not? Big Dipper Phoenix snorted coldly, hearing the doubt in the divine beast war soul's words. On the other side, Long Chen and Yubaigu rushed into the sky. In the clouds, beneath their feet was a sea of lightning. The two had exchanged several moves, but Yubaigu had not used his full strength. Yubaigu stared at Long Chen and said, "Your talent is really terrifying, but today you will definitely die. When the heaven immortals below kill all the saints, it will be the time of your death." Long Chen looked at Yubaigu and could not help but laugh. With a wave of his hand, a light screen appeared between the two. "If I were you, I wouldn't be dreaming here." Yubaigu's eyes were full of disbelief. In the light screen, although the tens of thousands of heaven immortals were not defeated, they were already declining. Yubaigu took a deep breath and stared at Long Chen. Then, he closed his eyes and opened them again. Everything in his eyes seemed to have disappeared, and only Long Chen was left. At this moment, his eyes were unprecedentedly fierce. "Today, let me see how you, a kid who has just stepped into the Nirvana realm, can defeat me." Yubaigu's long bone in his hand was like a whip as he attacked Long Chen. Evil art, 10,000 ghosts illusory kill. Before the whip landed, Long Chen felt the wind and clouds in front of him suddenly change. Even the saint weapon in his hand turned into a ghost that tried to devour him. In an instant, Long Chen felt a murderous intent firmly locked onto him. Ruler's immortal art, sword flow explosion. The scorching sun god behind Long Chen suddenly shook. It was as if the surrounding 100 feet was covered in flames, forming a domain of its own in an instant. The ghost in the illusory realm disappeared without a trace. Less than 10 meters in front of him, a long bone whip pierced towards Long Chen's glabella. The saint sword soared into the sky, and tens of thousands of sword rays turned into a sea of fire with Long Chen at the center. Yubaigu roared. Rumble. At the place where the two's attacks collided, a spatial crack that was close to 10,000 meters wide appeared from top to bottom. The raging wind even shattered the sea of lightning. The two sides below clearly felt the terrifying attack in the sky. They all knew that victory or defeat today would ultimately fall on Long Chen and Yubaigu. Above the 10th heaven, the transcendent ruler crossed 9 domains and finally stopped at the border of the 10th heaven. Chapter 626. Demon God transcending sovereign realm, his cultivation base has long reached the ascending heaven realm. He is the only powerhouse to reach the ascending heaven realm. In his previous life, when Long Chen stepped into the Nirvana realm, he personally appeared in front of Long Chen, helped him disperse the enemy, and taught him the secret of reversing reincarnation. Primal Chaos Golden Scripture. In this life, Long Chen entered the Nirvana realm again, and he was very excited. He knew that only Long Chen had the possibility of breaking through the ascending heaven realm and stepping into the great emperor realm. The eyes of the transcending sovereign realm seemed to be filled with countless laws. He stood in the void border of the 10th heaven, but the battle between Long Chen and Yubaigu was still vivid in his mind. 10th heaven. Long Chen and Yu Baigu have fought for more than 100 times, and Yu Baigu is like a madman. The long spine in his hand has merged with him, and this thing is very evil. It can even compete with the holy sword. Long Chen stared at Yu Baigu and the spine in his hand, and said solemnly, "There shouldn't be an evil cultivator in the 10th heaven. Today, I will use your life to establish my eternal divine kingdom." Formless sword art, 4th move. Nirvana fire domain. Buzz. Long Chen raised his sword horizontally, and an incomparably tyrannical aura suddenly soared into the sky. As soon as the holy sword appeared, the sky changed color. Under the dome of the sky, both sides felt an unprecedented pressure, and they actually stopped their attacks at the same time. Now, many heavenly immortals in the 10th heaven already had some thoughts of retreating. They really didn't expect that tens of thousands of people from the ancient desolate land could be on par with them. At this moment, Long Chen not only stepped into the Nirvana realm, but he also condensed the Nirvana fire domain and had the power of the holy sword in his hand. Perhaps even a middle-stage Nirvana realm expert can fight him. Rumble. Countless eyes looked at the sky and saw that there seemed to be an additional sun in the sky. In front of this sun was a black hole. Buzz. A sword wave swept out from the blazing sun, sweeping across hundreds of thousands of miles. The white clouds in the sky scattered instantly, leaving only the bright sky. Good swordsmanship. Sword Saint Lu Taishu couldn't help but praise. However, as soon as his voice fell, he couldn't help but shake his head and say, Yu Baigu was able to step into the sovereign realm with his evil cultivation and sit in the 10th heavenly palace. It's not that simple. The sword wave fell. Yu Baigu retreated tens of thousands of meters, and the ghost chi around him seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. Yu Baigu panted heavily as he stared at Long Chen. He knows that in terms of combat power, he, the ruler of the 10th heaven, has already fallen behind Long Chen. Long Chen had not only condensed the sun spirit and walked on a broad path, but he had also created the Nirvana fire domain. This domain made Long Chen practically invincible. Even though he had set foot in Long Chen's domain, he could still feel the suppression from the way of the heavens. Even the power of the rules had become chaotic. Nirvana fire territory used the power of the sun god to take the place of the heavens. Behind Long Chen, where the light of the divine palace's sun fell, all the rules were under his control. A touch of madness flashed in Yu Baigu's eyes, and he shouted, "You forced me to do this. Today, not only will I kill you, but I will also destroy everyone's divine soul." Heavenly Palace, demonic soul. Long Chen frowned suddenly. He saw the heavenly palace of white bones behind Yu Baigu soar into the sky, and the countless white bones on it seemed to be pulled towards Yu Baigu. White bone stairs, white bone walls, white bone courtyard. Every place seemed to contain countless souls and ghosts. In a flash, the entire heavenly palace fell from the heavenly palace, smashing the 4 heavenly cities into pieces. The heavenly palace fell, but those strange things all stayed behind Yu Baigu. It was a huge demon god. This god was extremely strange, but it also made people's hair stand on end. Long Chen's face became more and more gloomy. He had to admit that Yu Baigu's understanding of evil arts had really reached an unprecedented level. It was a pity that evil arts were only a small part of the outer sect. Long Chen also knew many evil arts in his previous life, but he disdained to use them. Long Chen looked at the demon god and muttered, "Using demonic souls and ghosts to replace the sun god, you are a genius in evil arts. However, evil arts are harmful to the harmony of the heavens. How many people did you kill to refine this soul?" Looking at it carefully, this soul was more than 10,000 feet tall, and its body was covered in black scales, emitting a terrifying dark purple light. Its body was like a standing demonic beast, but it had the 4 limbs of a human. That head, in particular, was even more horrifying. This demon god's body was 10,000 feet tall, but its head was only 10 feet in size. If that was all, it would be fine. This head was extremely small compared to the body, but it was a baby's head. Its mouth was filled with terrifying fangs, and on top of its head were 2 black patterned bull horns that were more than 10 feet long. When the demon god appeared, Yubaigo's aura suddenly rose rapidly. Yubaigu said coldly, "Today, after swallowing your sun god, I can change my fate and step into the yin-yang realm. Evil art, demon god's purgatory." As Yubaigo's voice fell, the huge demon god disappeared between heaven and earth. The demon god condensed from demonic chi appeared where Longchen was in the next moment, but Longchen had already entered his chest. Longchen's nirvana fire domain was like a scorching sun in the dark night, but the sun god behind him gradually dimmed for some reason. Such a scene was very strange in the eyes of the people on the ground. A gigantic demonic beast was released, and in the blink of an eye, Longchen was swallowed into its stomach. Firmament Dharma body. Longchen frowned slightly. He had just broken through to the nirvana realm, and the sun god behind him was too weak. If this continued, it would destroy its foundation. Although the three-eyed thunder dragon's body was not the strongest in combat, it was the most effective against evil things. Rumble. The thunder dragon's body surged, and when it appeared, the wind and clouds gathered, and thunder filled the sky. Yubaigu sneered, "It's useless. This demon god contains 50,000 babies of the yin year, yin month, and yin hour, as well as 100,000 human souls and hundreds of heavenly immortal realm monster cores. Originally, this art was not completed, but today, even if I have to waste 100 years of my work, I will take your life." As Yubaigo's voice fell, countless demonic chi turned into blood and began to surge toward Longchen. Longchen looked at the sacred sword in his hand and said, "Use all your strength in this sword. Break this place first." The sacred sword in Longchen's hand suddenly bloomed with divine light. Streaks of sword formations dispelled the ghostly aura in the surroundings. Rumble. With one sword, Longchen tore a 100-meter hole in the demon god's chest and abdomen, and then he rushed out with the thunder dragon's body. "It's useless, you will die today." Yubaigu sneered, but a blood sword flew out from his right hand, and turned into a cloud of blood mist, which turned into Longchen's shadow. The blood shadow appeared. Longchen had just stopped, and the next moment, he was swallowed by the demon god's shadow again. Roar! Chapter 627. My son Wuqing Mo. The demonic shadow swallowed again, and Longchen suddenly felt the world darken. This scene was seen by countless people below, and the morale of the heavenly immortals of the heavenly domain increased greatly. If Yubaigu won, they would reap great benefits from this battle, but now, in their eyes, Longchen was bound to lose. There was no way he could escape from such a terrifying demon god. Evil Soul Shadow. This technique is terrifying when used together with this demon god. Its power is even stronger than Longchen's Yang Soul. Although Longchen's talent is hard to find, he has just stepped into the sovereign realm. If he had 2 more years, or even a few more months, the situation would be completely different today. That's why Sovereign Uraith won't let him live. This kid will definitely die today. Let's quickly think of a way to get rid of these saints. As Yubaigu gained the upper hand, the situation below changed in an instant. Everyone knew that once Yubaigu won, then with his sovereign cultivation, all the chaos would be crushed. Rumble. The giant demonic god was like a collapsed mountain range. Countless ghosts turned into thousands of attacks and fell on Longchen from all directions. The light on the sacred weapon dimmed. The ghosts were full of resentment and filth, and were like fire and water to the sacred sword. Now that the sacred sword's power was weakening, the demon god's power did not change. Longchen sighed inwardly. Evil techniques were too strange. Although Yubaigu had not condensed his Yang Soul, and his cultivation was far from comparable to those of the same level, his many techniques were not inferior to anyone. If it was an ordinary early-stage sovereign, Longchen would not have such a hard time killing him with the sacred sword. Looks like I can only use the yin-yang immortal technique. Longchen waved his hand and used the sacred sword to devour the evil dragon staff. After all, the evil dragon staff was one of the top 3 weapons on the divine weapon ranking, and its quality was naturally not bad. The Saint Realm's dim light shone again. The yin-yang immortal technique was a technique that could only be used by the yin-yang sovereign. In the entire heavenly domain, only the yin-yang sovereign possessed such a technique. The reason was very simple. This technique required one to comprehend the heavens and earth, using one's yin and yang qi to replace the heavens and earth. Yin-yang immortal art. In other words, it was a self-comprehended technique of the yin-yang realm. Apart from the user, no one else could use this technique. Even though Longchen was at the nirvana realm, if he wanted to forcefully utilize the Tao of yin and yang, he would definitely suffer great losses. However, Longchen didn't want to drag this out any longer. He knew that if this life was similar to his previous one, the transcendent ruler would definitely come. With this thought in mind, Longchen's eyes suddenly became sharp, and the light of the holy sword in his hand flickered. Dao-du, Dao-du. Buzz buzz buzz. Just as Longchen was about to make a move, his thunder dragon body transformed back into his human form. Longchen's attack came to a halt as waves of searing pain shot out from his right arm that was holding the sacred weapon. Do-do. Do-do, come Fat Moo, help. Swish swish. Longchen was stunned. He didn't even hear what the strange fire beast was saying. The next moment, his eyes widened. In the inscription contract he had signed with the strange fire beast on his arm, a colorful demonic beast came out of the fire. The beast was about 5 meters long and as wide as a calf. Its fur was like countless flames that alternated between dark blue and fiery red. As soon as the beast appeared, the countless ghosts in the surroundings let out shrill cries, and all of them were reduced to black smoke in the air. The strange fire beast had a look of disgust as it rushed to Longchen's feet. It jumped around him and lifted him onto its back. Your strange fire has been completely repaired? How is this possible? Longchen sat on the beast's back and felt the warm flames beneath him. His eyes couldn't help but be attracted by the colorful feathers on the beast's neck. Even though Longchen's vision was shocking, his brain was short-circuited at this moment. In his previous life, the strange fire beast had offended countless people, but it still couldn't complete the strange fire. However, this demonic beast had only left for 3 years and it had completed it. Where did those star beasts take the strange fire beast? When the beast was taken away, the star beasts had agreed to a 3-year period with Longchen. Now, the 3-year period had already passed. However, Longchen didn't expect that the beast would appear here directly through the inscription of the contract. He could even feel that the beast had reached the level of a sovereign realm demonic beast. However, for some reason, it didn't take human form. Even his intelligence was only that of a child of a few years old. You came at the right time. Longchen stroked the strange fire beast's fur and shook his head with a smile. Now, with the addition of this beast, there was no suspense in this battle. Bean. Are you fat? You are indeed much fatter. Bean, help. The strange fire beast rushed out angrily and then went into the endless black smoke. Puff. 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 Countless painful screams after death resounded through the sky. The ear-piercing sound was like countless bats screaming. Countless people on the ground held their heads in pain. Even the heavenly immortals were no exception. The huge demon god's body was like boiling black water for a moment. Bang, bang, bang. Sounds of air exploding could be heard as flames of various colors streaked past. Some were like ice that instantly sealed off countless ghosts, some were like raging flames, and some were like will-o'-the-wisps that burned brighter and brighter wherever they passed. Poochie! How could this be? What's going on? What kind of deviant flame is this? Blood continued to flow out of Yubaigu's mouth, and his face was full of shock. He couldn't believe that his technique had been destroyed by the countless flames just like that. This demon god seemed to have an extremely close relationship with Yubaigu. As the deity was burned, the white bone body actually cracked inch by inch and ignited into a raging fire. Black blood flowed out of its 7 orifices. Longchen stepped out of the demon god's body with the holy sword in his hand. He looked at Yubaigu and shook his head. I didn't expect you to be so obsessed with the dark arts. The origin of this god is actually the soul of your physical body. The backlash of the evil arts. Today, you will definitely lose. Yu Baigu's eyes were bloodshot. Seeing that the demon god was about to die, he knew that he would definitely lose. Just as Longchen said, although the combat power of the dark arts was strong, once it backfired, he would no longer have the power to fight. Yu Baigu waved his hand and summoned the demon god back. He quickly retreated. Longchen saw that Yu Baigu was about to retreat but didn't chase after him. Instead, he smiled and said, "Do you still remember that you have a son named Yu Qingma?" Yu Baigu didn't know why Longchen asked this question. After he was tens of thousands of meters away from Longchen, he immediately tore through space to escape. However, Longchen didn't seem to have any intention of pursuing him, which made him very confused. Chapter 628. Establishing the Divine Kingdom. My son does not have the name Azure Demon. As soon as his voice fell, the figure of Yu Baigu, who was about to leave, suddenly stopped. Black death aura surged around his body, and there was endless resentment within it. Rumble. Yu Baigu's entire body began to twist, and a black shadow dragged him out of the spatial rift. My son does not have the name Azure Demon, no Azure Demon. Yu Baigu's exhausted voice roared from within. Then, who am I? Who am I, you Azure Demon? Yu Baigu seemed to be enduring unprecedented pain. His eyes were filled with fear. At this moment, his soul began to peel away from his body, and his cultivation began to backfire. You Azure Demon, why are you in my body? Yu Baigu was in agony. He stared at Longchen. What did you do? Longchen stood in the distance, but he had already collected all the divine weapons. He knew that Yu Baigu was finished. That day, after Longchen killed Yu Azure Demon, he had kept his soul captive for today. But in reality, Yu Azure Demon had such a huge reaction. Yu Baigu knew of Yu Azure Demon, but he had never thought of him as his son. Perhaps, he was just a sword in his hand, or perhaps a dog. Yu Azure Demon himself cultivated evil arts, and he yearned for Yu Baigu's father-son relationship. That day, when he knew that Longchen had a divine sword, he immediately went to snatch it. Even when he found the azure veined ore, he wanted to give it to Yu Baigu. He only wanted to return to the heavenly palace and let Yu Baigu acknowledge him as his son. This strong obsession turned into unprecedented resentment when Yu Baigu said, "My son does not have the name Azure Demon. You have cultivated evil arts to such a level, so you should know where the problem is." Longchen said, shaking his head. Bang bang bang. As soon as Longchen finished speaking, Yu Baigu's body began to crumble at a speed visible to the naked eye. Even his soul began to be eaten by countless ghosts. You turned Azure Demon's soul into a ghost and used his bloodline to stay in the demon god? Yu Baigu stood there in a daze, his eyes surprisingly calm. Naturally, he knew that Yu Baigu had died at the hands of Longchen. However, he did not expect that Longchen seemed to have known about this battle beforehand. He had kept his soul and used some kind of curse technique. Even if he immediately admitted that Azure Demon was his son, he would still suffer a severe backlash and would not be able to escape Longchen's pursuit. Yu Baigu, walked all the way to the sovereign realm from the evil cultivator that everyone hated. I never thought that I would die here today. Azure Demon was originally a ghost, but because of me, it took human form. It can't be considered a human. He can only be considered the son of a ghost. How can he be the bloodline of my nether white bones? Everything that happened today is just karma. I just didn't expect that someone as talented as you would also know how to use curses. As Yu Baigu's voice fell, his entire soul was completely swallowed by countless ghosts and then shattered into pieces. Longchen shook his head. He was able to become the youngest sovereign realm powerhouse in his previous life, so he naturally dabbled in evil techniques. However, he rarely used them. If this curse technique was used on others, it might not have any effect at all. However, it was completely different on Yu Baigu. Yu Baigu used evil techniques as his foundation, and his body was already close to a demon. Once the evil technique backfired, it would be like a broken dam. However, he did not expect that Gu would not admit that Azure Demon was his son even after his death. Perhaps in his eyes, Azure Demon was not even as good as a sword and could only be regarded as one of the countless ghosts in his hands. However, there were too many ghosts in his hands. Father, accompany me forever, accompanied by a low chant, Gu, who cultivated evil techniques, completely disappeared from the 10th heaven. The sky where the two forces collided calmed down in an instant. Everyone's attacking consciousness came to an abrupt end. In the sky, the black fog retreated. The god like a scorching sun slowly descended. Longchen won? How is this possible? Gu was actually defeated. The 10th heaven has changed hands. This person has already stepped into the sovereign realm through the domain steals, but now he has already killed the sovereign realm ghost. Countless exclamations rose one after another, and the heavenly immortal powerhouses were rioting. Long Chen's figure gradually descended from the sky and finally appeared in everyone's field of vision. He was sitting on a brightly colored fire beast. Behind him, there was a blazing sun rising and falling. The figure inside the blazing sun looked like a god. Under such a scene, all the people from the ancient desolate land knelt on the ground, their eyes full of piety. Put on. Many of the great ancient clans of the 10th heaven looked at each other in dismay, then knelt down one after another, no longer having the will to fight. Longchen looked up at the sky, and the divine light around his body condensed like a waterfall. He murmured, "Today, I have established a divine country for the heavenly Tao in the name of the Yang God. It is called Firmament." Rumble. As Long Chen's voice fell, everyone felt the power of laws in all directions become chaotic at a speed visible to the naked eye. The abyss that had appeared on the ground because of this battle was restored to its original state in a flash. The ground full of ravines actually swung up a huge mountain. Countless people trembled, and the fear of the great ancient clans of the heaven domain was gradually replaced by reverence. They had never seen this kind of power from the sovereign realm ghost. The huge mountain rose from the ground and turned into a divine statue in a flash. The divine statue was impressively Long Chen's appearance. When the divine statue was formed, the god behind Long Chen turned into a flame and fell on the divine statue, then disappeared without a trace. This scene caused everyone to look at the divine statue that rose from the ground. They saw that this divine statue was no different from Long Chen, but there was a flame-patterned jade token in its hand. There seemed to be flowing flames intertwining on the jade token, and it also seemed like a million rays of light. Under the rays of light, there were only 12 large words. Behind them were 4 words, Firmament Divine Country. In front of it, there were 8 large words that everyone could see, Receive the mandate of heaven, live forever and prosper. Long Chen's god fell on the stone statue, and there was a bit more charm, and it was quite lifelike. Long Chen stood in the air, and his voice was like the evening drum and morning bell, as if it went straight into everyone's soul. The 10th heaven is the last of the 10 domains. But today, under the firmament divine country, all who kneel and worship me can be my people and receive the good fortune that I have done on behalf of heaven. Long Chen's right hand rose from between his eyebrows, and a black light fell directly on the divine statue. The divine statue, which was originally incomparably brilliant, began to change rapidly from between its eyebrows. Countless carving knives were wantonly cut from top to bottom, and in the blink of an eye, inscription grooves were all over it. That is the origin of wind, that is the origin of rain. There are immortal inscriptions, and there is also the comprehension of the earth immortal realm. My 10th heaven finally has a divine country established, leaving behind a divine statue. Chapter 629. Transcendence. Again outside the border of the 10th heaven, the transcendent ruler was still standing in place. The countless gales around him couldn't even get close to him. Behind him, 9 golden crows soared. Establishing a divine country, competing with all the other divine countries in the 10 heavens for the heavenly Tao, worthy of the owner of the great emperor physique. The transcendent ruler's eyes narrowed. In front of him, there were 10 scorching sun discs, on which images were constantly flashing. In the center of the fire disk was Long Chen, the 10th heaven's Long Chen's actions. Let's take a look. The images in the other 9 disks continued to flash. It turned out to be the images of the statues in the other 9 heavens. After Long Chen established his divine country, every statue in the 10 heavens had an invisible aura extracted from it. Many sovereigns soared into the sky, and for a time, the entire 10 heavens was in turmoil. The transcendent ruler shook his head, and a golden crow appeared behind him. As the golden crow swept past, the border of the 10th heaven was torn apart like a gauze. Poochie Poochie as the border of the 10 heavens was torn apart, space storms and turbulence madly poured into the 10th heaven. In the 10th heaven, everyone could feel that space seemed to be distorted. Long Chen's pupils shrank suddenly, and the corners of his mouth revealed an unprecedented sneer. This sneer was bone-chilling. Even Qing Xian and Ao Tsungqiong, who were the closest to Long Chen, couldn't help frowning slightly and subconsciously took a few steps back. Long Chen knew that the biggest enemy of his previous life was about to appear. Only a sovereign realm expert can break through the barrier of the 10 heavens and cross over. And the one who came here can only be him, a transcendent ruler. The scenes of his previous life were still vivid in Long Chen's mind. In his previous life, he had just stepped into the sovereign realm, and he only wanted to pursue the great Tao and reverse the reincarnation cycle. When he broke through to the sovereign realm, a transcendent ruler appeared. It was him who gave Long Chen all hope. Long Chen turned around and saw 10 scorching suns rising in the sky. For a time, all eyes looked at the sky in an instant. In the dazzling radiance that filled the sky, an old man wearing a purple gold robe of 9 ravens stepped through the air. Every step he took caused spatial ripples to spread out. The 9 additional suns were unexpectedly the gods behind him. The old man had the demeanor of a transcendent being. He seemed to have attained the Tao long ago, and his heart was detached from the moral world. Bloodline Azure Cloud Proclamation, the second bloodline, the 9-winged golden crow. This is the legendary number 1 reclusive sovereign of the 10 directions celestial domain, someone who has surpassed the sovereign realm. Perhaps these people had never seen a transcendent ruler, but they knew about the Bloodline Azure Sky rankings. The Imperial College also clearly recorded the names and bloodlines of the transcendent sovereigns. Everyone's faces were filled with fear when they heard this. No one dared to make the slightest sound. Even their heartbeats could no longer be heard. Everyone's forehead was already buried in the ground. Only those who were closest to Long Chen and were enveloped by his nirvana fire domain were in a much better state. But even so, many people couldn't help but want to kneel down. They felt as if the blood in their bodies was about to boil. Young friend, you're a genius. You're not even 20 years old, yet you've already reached the ruler realm, stepped into nirvana, and established a divine nation. Since the immemorial era, there hasn't been another person with such providence. The transcendent ruler looked at Long Chen with admiration. His every action, every word, and every smile made everyone feel as if they were bathed in a spring breeze. As soon as he finished speaking, countless people were shocked. Long Chen was really only 20 years old? Although they had heard about it long ago, none of them took it to heart. Now that they heard the transcendent ruler's words, no one doubted it. A ruler expert around 20 years old, how is this possible? Among the people present, even the youngest heavenly immortal was probably over 100 years old. If Long Chen was really only 20 years old, what kind of talent was this? At this moment, everyone looked at Long Chen with reverence that was not inferior to the transcendent rulers. Such a talented person would definitely not be inferior to the transcendent ruler in the future. While everyone was shocked, they felt the pressure around them move like a mountain, and they immediately breathed a sigh of relief. But no one dared to make the slightest sound. No one thought that Long Chen's establishment of a divine nation would attract a legendary figure. Long Chen and the transcendent ruler looked at each other. Long Chen's face was incomparably calm, like an ancient well. His cold eyes had long disappeared without a trace. He looked at the transcendent ruler as if he was looking at a stranger and said, "Sir, there's no harm in speaking." The transcendent ruler stared at Long Chen. With a wave of his hand, more than 10 figures appeared. They were the Nether Ghost ruler's son and his subordinates. These people all cultivate evil arts, and their bodies are full of negative karma. I passed by here and saw several people who violated the laws of the 10 directions heavens and completely sealed the 10th heaven, so I captured them all. The transcendent ruler's tone did not weaken, and there was a sense of righteousness that bemoaned the state of the universe and pitted the fate of mankind. Longchen sneered in his heart, but his expression did not change. He replied, "If that's the case, then you can just kill them. What does it have to do with me?" The transcendent ruler saw that Longchen was so vigilant, and yet he still crushed the people of the Yu family with a casual wave of his hand. His strength had reached a shocking level. These people deserve to die. He opened his mouth again and said, "I came here today for another matter, and that is the 2 souls and 7 spirits." Buzz. As the transcendent ruler's voice fell, the 2 souls and 7 spirits of Long Chen's mother appeared in his hand. Long Chen's face suddenly sank, and the saint weapon in his hand moved. He cried out involuntarily, "Mother!" The transcendent ruler waved his hand and threw the souls to Long Chen. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but reveal a faint playful smile. The 3 souls and 7 spirits gathered, and Long Chen's nirvana immoral force surged. Then, he shouted, "Condense!" As soon as his voice fell, immoral force lingered around his 3 souls and 7 spirits. Just as they were about to fuse, they suddenly scattered. There was a red and black line lingering in each of the 3 souls and 7 spirits. When Longchen saw this, his eyes narrowed, and he quickly withdrew his divine force. He said gloomily, "Demonic soul transformation technique." When the transcendent ruler heard this, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Then, he said, "I didn't expect you to know so much about demonic arts. Then you should know that those who have this technique planted in their souls will definitely die." Longchen stared coldly at the transcendent ruler and said coldly, "This technique was planted by you? How did you obtain my mother's soul? What do you want to do today?" Longchen already had the answer to these questions in his heart. This technique was indeed planted by Yu Baigu, but the one controlling it was definitely a transcendent ruler. And he had come today to accept a disciple. In his previous life, he wanted to hold Longchen tightly in his hands and find the so-called Primal Chaos Golden Codex for him. Chapter 630. 3 years the transcendent ruler was known for his transcendence. He had already reached the sovereign realm, but there were very few people in the 10 directions heaven domain who understood him. In his past life, when Longchen had reached the sovereign realm, he had crossed over to Longchen and saved Ascension. He had also taught Longchen that there was only one thing in the world that could reverse the cycle of reincarnation. That was the Primal Chaos Golden Scripture. Longchen had been subdued by his cultivation and temperament, so he had been accepted as a disciple. But that was also the beginning of Longchen's nightmare. It wasn't until Longchen was besieged by the 10 strongest sovereigns of the 10 directions heaven domain that he saw the true face of the transcendent ruler. Transcendence? He had never transcended. In the 10 directions heaven domain, every sovereign realm expert had been trained by him. Even Yu Baigu was no exception. He was an ambitious man. He had promoted the strongest sovereigns of the 10 directions heaven domain to the position of palace master, then controlled all other experts. In the final battle, he had wiped out the firmament divine kingdom that Longchen had built. He had wiped out Ascension, the firmament divine 7 lineages, the dark night divine kingdom, and everyone related to Longchen. The 10 directions heaven domain's palace masters had all participated in that battle, but there were far more people who had participated. He wanted to shatter Longchen's Tao heart and take the Primal Chaos Golden Scripture from Longchen's hands. But he still had to ask these questions. He couldn't let the transcendent ruler discover that something was amiss. He had just reached the Nirvana realm, so it was impossible for him to fight against a transcendent ruler. Longchen knew how powerful a transcendent ruler was. A Nirvana realm expert might be no different from a child in his eyes. His Ascension realm cultivation was enough to call him the strongest expert in the 10 directions heaven domain since the ancient times. the transcendent ruler's expression didn't change when he heard Long Chen's words. Instead, he shook his head and smiled. I encountered these souls at the edge of the void. If you observe carefully, you will notice that her 2 souls and 7 spirits are filled with the power of nothingness. She should have accidentally escaped into the void when she was being separated. After a pause, he continued. It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. Moreover, if I want to kill someone, I'm afraid no one in the 10th heaven is worthy of me using their mother as a hostage. His words were frank and magnanimous, but they were imposing without being angry. The surrounding people nodded in agreement. If one wanted to separate the 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls from the spirit, there was a risk that it would fall into the void. In particular, the lower one's cultivation, the more likely it was that their soul would be completely devoured by the void. Once the divine soul was separated, if the 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls accidentally wandered in the void, they would eventually disappear completely. Moreover, it was just as the transcendent ruler had said. If he wanted to kill Long Chen, there was no need for him to resort to such underhanded means. Seeing that Long Chen was speechless for a while, the transcendent ruler showed a look of appreciation and said solemnly, I came here today for only one thing. My cultivation has reached the connecting heaven realm as early as 7,000 years ago, and my heart has long seen through all this nonsense. Today, I walked through the void and saw the battle between you and Yu Bai Gu, and by chance, I obtained your mother's 2 spiritual and 6 physical souls. This is the result of fate. Today, I want to accept you as my disciple and pass on my mantle. Are you willing to worship me as your master? Worship me as your master. As soon as this statement fell, everyone was in an uproar. Everyone couldn't help but look at each other, feeling their minds go blank. Today, for everyone in the 10th heaven, it was like a dream. First, Long Chen stepped into the Nirvana realm, led the Saint Realm experts in the ancient desolate land to fight Yu Bai Gu, and then erected a statue to transform the divine kingdom. Now, this legendary ruler powerhouse actually came in person to accept a disciple. For a while, the breathing of everyone in the 10th heaven became heavy. Long Chen established the divine kingdom with the sun god and cast the divine kingdom's guardian statue to enhance the destiny of the entire realm. If they can worship a transcendent ruler as their master, the 10th heaven may start to reach its peak from today onwards. The transcendent ruler didn't say anything after that, just looked at Long Chen, as if waiting for his answer. Jianshi San and the others were very vigilant, waiting for Long Chen's decision. Lu Taishu stared at Jianshi San, looking a little impatient. He said solemnly, The transcendent ruler abhors evil. Before I entered the Dominator realm, his name was like thunder in my ears. If you worship him as your master, you will definitely become a giant in the future. Why are you still hesitating? Long Chen stared at the transcendent ruler, not taking Lu Taishu's words to heart. How could he see through the transcendent ruler's secret? Long Chen took a deep breath and said, Senior's kindness, I naturally don't dare to refuse, but if I, Long Chen, want to worship a master, the whole world must know. Today, I have just established my divine kingdom, and my foundation is not stable yet. Please give me a few more days. The transcendent ruler stared at Long Chen for a long time, then nodded slightly and said with a smile, Young people can be proud, but they can't be without arrogance. Since I, Han Shuzi, am accepting a disciple today, naturally the whole world must know. 3 years later, at the peak of the first heaven, I will hold a ceremony for you to worship a master. After saying that, the transcendent ruler waved his hand and turned around to leave. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly turned back and said, Although your mother is affected by this evil technique, and even with my cultivation, I can't remove it, but there is still one thing in this world that can save her name. So it came? Long Chen sneered in his heart, but on the surface, he quickly asked, What is it? The Primal Chaos Golden Codex. After saying that, the transcendent ruler disappeared in front of everyone, followed by the 9 blazing suns that appeared out of thin air. The 9 blazing suns were formed by the power of his bloodline, and the 9 golden crows could burn thousands of miles. The transcendent ruler left. Long Chen stood in place and stared at the place where the transcendent ruler had disappeared. From reverence to coldness, then to killing intent, and then to calmness again, but his fists were tightly clenched, and his fingertips were deeply embedded in his flesh. It was almost the same scene. From this moment on in his previous life, he had become a chess piece in this person's hands. 3 years? In 3 years, he wanted to turn the 10 heavens upside down. He wanted the enemy of his previous life, the ruler of the 10 heavens, to fall. The transcendent ruler only gave him 3 years. After 3 years, he would not kneel in front of this person again, even if he had to die. Everyone felt Long Chen's strangeness, but no one knew what Long Chen was thinking. Long Chen's eyes instantly became clear, and he had everything. He turned and said, 13, go back to Sword Saint City with Senior Liu. Jianshi San cupped his fists and nodded, but before he left, he said, 13 is obsessed with the sword Dao, but my sword Dao was given to me by Master. Jianshi San then left with Lu Taishu. Long Chen's gaze fell on the heavenly palace that had fallen into the 4 heavenly cities. Rise! Long Chen took a step forward and arrived above the palace. With a series of rumbling sounds, the heavenly palace rose into the air once more. The city now appeared to be in a state of decay, but Long Chen's lips curled into a faint smile. He waved his hand, indicating for Ao Tsuncheong to come forward, and said, if my guess is correct, this heavenly palace should have something from your dark star. Chapter 631. Treasure Trove. Long Chen and the others stepped into the heavenly palace, and it took a while for the people outside to react. Soon after, a series of noisy noises spread out. Many of the major clans were excited. Quick, bring all the younger generation of our clans here to worship the Domain Guardian statue. With this statue, as long as the ruler lives, the 10th heaven will be filled with powerhouses. Yu Baigu has been a ruler for so long, but he can't build a statue without a sun god. This Long Chen has such courage, it's a great opportunity for our 10th heaven. I only hope that his statue won't attract powerhouses from other heavens to destroy it. Building a statue and receiving worship from the people of a realm. This statue is a great opportunity. Long Chen's move has caused quite a stir in the entire 10th heaven. In the 10 heavens, not all rulers can establish a divine country, and those who can establish a divine country rarely dare to build a statue. Now that the statue is being worshipped, it's tantamount to seizing the destiny of the 10 heavens. Many people even felt uneasy, fearing that the rulers of other heavens will come and destroy the statue. On the other side, Long Chen wasn't worried about this matter at all. The transcendent rulers deliberately asked him to find the primal chaos golden tome, so they won't let the other heavens invade. Inside the heavenly palace, Long Chen led everyone through a long corridor of the palace and finally came to a great hall supported by 99 giant pillars. The great hall is paved with black stone inscriptions, but at this moment, the light of these inscriptions is dim, as if they have lost their source of power. In order to make the heavenly palace rise again, at least a dozen top-grade spirit veins will be needed, and the array inscriptions will be activated again. Let's go to the heavenly palace's treasury first. Long Chen continued to walk deeper. Ao Tsuncheong was quite puzzled and asked, how do you know that there is something here from the dark star? Long Chen smiled and said, just take a look and you'll know. I haven't been here before, but in my opinion, there should be something you want here. Long Chen's words were not baseless. In his previous life, Ao Tsuncheong stepped into the Dominator realm more than 100 years after Long Chen. When he first established his divine kingdom, he came to the 10th heaven and fought with Lord Yugue. His goal was to hide the treasures here. However, at that time, Ao Tsuncheong did not allow Long Chen to intervene, so Long Chen did not know what it was. In his previous life, Long Chen and Ao Tsuncheong suffered a lot in the 10th heaven, but they didn't fight with Yu Baigu. This life is completely different. Long Chen's life had not only changed his own path, but the people around him had also received heaven-defying good fortune. For example, Yi Hailan and Qing Xian, not only did they completely get rid of the fate of their previous lives, but their cultivation speed even surpassed that of the 10th heaven star child. The group passed through the corridor and followed the inscribed black stones to the end. They turned left at the last pillar and came face to face with a blood jade mine door. The door was engraved with a big word hide in white jade. As soon as Long Chen's nirvana divine domain dissipated, everyone felt warm all over, as if they were completely separated from the outside world. When they reappeared, the blood jade door was already behind them. Long Chen's simple move was really amazing for them. Each of them was full of yearning for the nirvana realm. But soon their eyes moved away from Long Chen, because the dazzling things in front of them completely stunned them. The blood jade door here was only 10 meters long and wide, but now the space in front of them seemed to have become a place of its own. In front of them were two tall, brown, ancient wooden bookshelves. On the bookshelves were boxes made of different materials to store different items. The bookshelves stood side by side, placed dozens of meters along the center line, like a bright wall, dividing the square room into 3 paths. The path between the left bookshelf and the wall was full of sparkling and translucent colors. Looking up, it turned out to be a long spiritual field. The field was full of starlight, and there were starry sky treasures everywhere. The space between the 2 bookshelves made everyone frown slightly. There was a cloud of black mist condensed here. Ascension and the others couldn't see more than 10 meters away, but the evil aura emitted from it made them tremble with fear. The path between the bookshelf on the right and the wall on the right was much simpler. There were many talismans, weapons, and even many ancient jade slips. Young master, these are all starry sky treasures? There are so many starry sky treasures in this heavenly palace. There are also boxes on this bookshelf filled with immortal power. Each of them is absolutely not ordinary. If these things are used to cultivate talented people, at least 1,000 heavenly immortals can be cultivated. Ascension was also a little surprised. Long Chen shook his head when he heard this and said with a smile, if Big Brother has such a physique, with these things, he can reach the heavenly immortal realm in less than 10 years. With my guidance, he can even set foot in the nirvana realm in 10 years, but even in the entire 10th heaven, how many people have the same aptitude as you? Moreover, with Yu Baigu's character, how can he give these things to other big clans? In fact, Long Chen didn't say anything. That is, Yu Baigu doesn't have a sun god. Even if he has a sun god, he doesn't dare to build a statue. Without a statue, many people will be forced to die at the peak of the earth immortal realm. Ascension was taken aback for a moment, then suddenly realized that he was wrong to think of others from his own perspective. With Long Chen's aptitude, so many starry sky treasures are enough to cultivate a sovereign realm powerhouse. However, how many people in the world have the aptitude of Long Chen? Ascension shook his head and laughed, but as if he thought of something, he asked Long Chen, then do you know what kind of physique I have? I didn't find a matching description on the Bloodline Azure Cloud list. It's on the Bloodline Azure Cloud list. It's just that you didn't notice it. You'll know when the time comes. Long Chen shook his head and revealed a playful smile, but he shook his head and didn't point it out. Ascension was about to ask again, but he saw the black fog between the 2 bookshelves in front of him suddenly tumble. Everyone's faces immediately turned vigilant. Long Chen frowned slightly, and his face revealed surprise. The scorching sun behind him emitted rays of light that filled the sky, forcibly dispersing the black fog in the middle of the road. However, at the end of the road, the last 3 meters, there was still a black fog that didn't disperse. Qing Xian and the others looked at each other in surprise. At this moment, Long Chen's sun god power didn't disperse the fog, which was enough to show that this place was extraordinary. Long Chen said to the others, you guys see if there's anything related to the Dark Star organization on this bookshelf. Big Brother and I will go and see what's so strange about this place. Everyone nodded in agreement. Only Yi Hailan stood in place without making a sound, and didn't move in the slightest. Long Chen and Ascension walked forward one after another, and in the blink of an eye, they were already in front of the black fog. Ascension's eyes filled with immortal power, and then he subconsciously stretched out his hand. What is this? Chapter 632. Sword dance for you behind the heavenly palace's blood jade gate. Everyone was shocked by Long Chen's action, and they all looked at the end of the passage between the two bookshelves. Daodu, Daodu. The strange fire beast rushed out of the inscription on Long Chen's right hand, covered in flames, and rushed into the black fog. At the same time, Long Chen's complexion changed dramatically, and the light around his body shone brightly as he pulled Ascension out of the black fog. The two instantly retreated hundreds of meters, and both of them still had lingering fear in their hearts. The people behind them rushed over one after another, and they all looked at the black fog in horror. What is this thing? Dongfang Jin asked in shock. Qing Xian also couldn't help but move closer to Long Chen, hugging his arm in his arms, looking a little uneasy. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the black fog actually transformed into a heavenly flame beast, and its appearance seemed to be carved from the same mold as Daodu. The two clashed together, and it was hard to tell who had the upper hand. In addition to its dark body, this thing can even use the power of strange fire. It's really strange. Long Chen stared at the black fog, but his eyes passed through the strange fire beast and looked at the center of the black fog. There was a pair of eyes floating in the air. Netherworld eyes. How could this thing appear in the 10th heaven? After a short pause, Long Chen willed Daodu to disappear into the black fog. After the strange fire beast left, the black fog once again turned into a state without any rules. It's just that this time, everyone could see through the black fog and see a pair of emotionless eyes, which was really creepy. Ascension's face was a little pale, and he said in a deep voice, "This thing is too evil." At that moment, my mind was captured by it. Long Chen nodded, but for some reason, his eyes were a little brighter, and he explained. This thing is an evil creature from the netherworld, an evil creature born from heaven and earth. Evil creature? Everyone looked at each other, feeling more and more strange. It's obviously an evil creature, but it doesn't have the slightest ghost aura. Instead, it has a sense of purity. Before anyone could say anything, Long Chen gestured for everyone to step back and said in a deep voice, "You guys help Big Brother retrieve the item from Dark Star. If you guys get too close to it, you might lose your lives." Everyone stepped back. Qing Xian looked at Long Chen worriedly. Long Chen said, "Don't worry. It's not a problem to get this thing." Yi Hailan finally opened his mouth and said, "Dongfang Jin, you and Ascension can go and search. The two of us will stay here and watch." Dongfang Jin looked at the two women, Qing Xian and Yi Hailan. How could he not understand their intentions? He pulled Ascension towards the two bookshelves and the jade scroll on the rightmost side. Long Chen nodded and walked towards the black fog again. However, this time, Long Chen didn't approach it. He stopped 10 meters away. Thunder, heavenly flame. Sun god. Within the scorching sun behind Long Chen, the shape of a god appeared once again. The god's body was surrounded by multicolored light and was indescribably resplendent. Thunder condensed in his left hand and raging flames surged in his right hand. Buzz. Following the sound of thunder and fire exploding. The god behind Long Chen held the thunder and fire in his hand and tore through the sky. The thunder and fire instantly enveloped the entire black fog. It actually used the power of thunder and fire to form a cage. It seemed like it wanted to refine the item. The black fog churned and turned into lightning and raging flames. However, each time, it would disappear without a trace in less than 10 breaths. Long Chen's eyes suddenly narrowed and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. The netherworld I could see through everything in the world. Therefore, it could transform into a heavenly flame beast or even a person. However, it couldn't transform into a sun god. The sun god was formed from the divine sense of the Nirvana realm expert, Tao Tao. However, if he wanted to completely refine it, it wouldn't be something that could be done in 1 or 2 days. Long Chen sat down cross-legged and poured his divine sense into the sun god. He used the power of the sun god to bombard the netherworld eye. In the blink of an eye, 7 or 8 days passed. After Ascension cried out in alarm, Dongfang Jin and Ascension took the lead to leave the heavenly palace. At that moment, only Qing Xian, Yi Hailan, and Long Chen remained in the heavenly palace. Yi Hailan held his sword and kept his eyes closed. Qing Xian stared at Long Chen. Suddenly, the silence was broken. Qing Xian asked Yi Hailan in a low voice, "Do you like young master?" Yi Hailan didn't reply and didn't even open his eyes. Qing Xian didn't look at her and just said, "I know that you like young master. I'm willing to serve young master together with you. You can be the big one and I'll be the little one." Her cheeks were slightly red and she looked like a pretty girl from a humble family discussing her marriage. Regardless of whether she was in the origin immortal realm, earth immortal realm, or even a ruler, Long Chen was still young master in her heart. She was still a servant. Yi Hailan still didn't reply, but her hands were sweaty for some reason. Qing Xian continued, "If you don't want to, I can be young master's servant for the rest of my life." She sounded a little disappointed. Yi Hailan still didn't say anything, but he turned into a ray of light and left the heavenly palace through the broken blood jade door. This might be her answer. Outside the heavenly palace, it was already late at night. Yi Hailan stood in front of the statue and stared at the majestic figure in a daze. He didn't move at all. At that moment, she seemed to have turned into a stone statue and become a part of Long Chen. At sunrise, countless worshippers came forward dauntlessly. Many of them kowtowed 9 times every 3 steps. Some prayed for wind and rain, some prayed for opportunities, and some sat down to comprehend the concept, but once the sun set, they would all leave, as if they were following some kind of rule. But today, a woman still stood in front of the statue. The woman's expression was cold, but she had a face that made all the other women jealous. Her delicate body started to wield a sword at some unknown time. Under the setting sun, a beautiful picture was formed. The gentle setting sun reflected her perfect curves. The light gradually disappeared, but her sword became faster and faster. The moment the sun set, a body condensed from light appeared from the statue. He looked at Yi Hailan in a daze and said, "Are you leaving?" Yi Hailan nodded. She was still wielding a sword. Long Chen didn't ask again. The light of the statue gradually dimmed like a piece of burning iron. His right hand turned into a sword, and there was one more person wielding a sword. Time seemed to flow backward. In the land of the 5 sects, in the back mountain of the Wanjian sect. Outside the bamboo house, a man and a woman were wielding a sword under the setting sun. The afterglow of the setting sun is much more beautiful than the sunrise in the morning. Where? The person wielding the sword. Long Chen didn't ask her to stay because he understood her. Just like how she understood him, a close female friend was nothing more than this. The morning sun rose as usual, but there was no one wielding a sword in front of the statue. Inside the heavenly palace, Long Chen sat cross-legged in front of the black fog. For some reason, his eyes were closed and somewhat moist. Chapter 633. Crossing domains in the blink of an eye. A month passed. Long Chen and Qing Xian walked out of the heavenly palace side by side. Dongfang Jin and Ascension came head-on, but stopped a few meters away from Long Chen. Their eyes fell on Long Chen's eyes for the first time. In the depths of his eyes, there seemed to be another pupil in the pupil. "My lord, your eyes?" Dongfang Jin glanced at it and felt a burst of fear. He couldn't help but look away. Long Chen smiled and said, "This pair of eyes may be of great help to me. It seems that Yu Baigu being able to condense a demon god has a lot to do with it. It's a pity that he doesn't have a sun god, otherwise, this thing wouldn't have remained until now." Ascension frowned slightly and said, "This thing is too evil, you have to be more careful." Long Chen nodded and led everyone to the stone statue. At this moment, the stone statue was a bit more ethereal. Not only did the inscriptions on it not weaken in the slightest, but they also became brighter and brighter, and many blank places were filled up out of thin air. After a moment of silence, Long Chen muttered, With the heavenly palace as the foundation, establish a divine kingdom, find Big Dipper Phoenix for me. Dongfang Jing turned around and left. Not long after, Big Dipper Phoenix came one after another. Dongfang Jing, you can take 30% of the immortal treasures in the heavenly palace. The people of the Pill Tower should be happy to refine them. Bring Lu Yi and Qing Xian to the 10th heaven. Continue to recruit the major clans of the heavenly palace. The training ground will be opened again. Recruit people with good aptitude above the earth immoral realm. They can stay in front of the statue day and night to meditate. Within a year, eliminate all the evil cultivators left behind by you by Gu and bring back all the resources. Everyone could smell the tension in the air when they heard the orders. At this moment, as the ruler of the 10th heaven, Longchen had already reached the Nirvana realm. There was no need for him to do such a thing. He also has a legendary Quasi-Master. Everyone looked at each other, and gradually saw a touch of uneasiness in each other's eyes. The 3-year promise. Longchen was in such a hurry to consolidate his power and nurture powerhouses above the Earth's celestial stage. This made the onlookers speculate about his intentions. However, they didn't know why Longchen wanted to make an enemy out of a transcendent ruler. They didn't even want to believe it. An expert at the peak of the reaching heaven state who had surpassed the Dominator realm. The most powerful existence in the 10th heaven, Dongfang Jing bowed and retreated. Longchen didn't intend to explain. He just said to Beta Phoenix, "Come with me to the 9th and 8th heavens. I want to find a few people." The Big Dipper Phoenix nodded in agreement. It was as if he wasn't going to the 9th heaven, but to another city. Upon hearing this, Ao Tsungcheong reminded him, "You have just stepped into the ruler realm. If you enter the 9th heaven now, I'm afraid there will be a lot of trouble." Longchen didn't answer because he knew he had to make this trip. In fact, he doesn't only need to go to the 9th and 8th heavens. There was another place he didn't mention, and it was the 9th hell. The 9th hell is a place of death at the intersection of the 10 heavens. This place is extremely mysterious. Only a few rulers in the 10 heavens know about it, but few people dare to set foot in it. Because it's a paradise for the evil race and the demon race. Big brother, as long as I'm in the 10th heaven, you can rest here without worry. But if one day you are willing to leave, I don't want you to stay because of me. Longchen knew that Ao Tsungcheong wanted revenge. Longchen couldn't help him with this revenge. However, he didn't want Ao Tsungcheong to stay in the 10th heaven because of him. He even hoped that Ao Tsungcheong would leave the 10th heaven. In this life, Longchen is destined to fight against a transcendent ruler with his own strength. Longchen has never been a person who is willing to endure, and his knees rarely bend. 3 years is too short, but Longchen didn't want to wait any longer. At the moment when he saw a transcendent ruler, the greatest anger in his heart was ignited. The feeling of being played in the palm of someone's hand and betrayed made him furious. When countless people died in front of him, the hatred has already penetrated deep into his bone marrow. Even if he is reborn, he can't forget it. In this life, he is destined to fight alone. In his previous life, Ao Tsungcheong was already a ruler of the night. On that day, he had destroyed his own Dao heart and died in front of Longchen. He had killed the rulers of the various regions for him. In this life, Ao Tsungcheong can't step into the ruler realm in 3 years, let alone be an enemy of a transcendent ruler. Ao Tsungcheong looked at Longchen and finally said, "I will go to the 9th heaven with you. I won't drink this time, but when I return, I will drink." The two looked at each other and smiled. The next morning, before leaving, Longchen decided to go to Sword Saint City to see the Jianshi San. But when he arrived at Sword Saint City, he couldn't help smiling bitterly. At this moment, Sword Saint City had completely disappeared, leaving behind only a sword domain. In fact, all the spectators within the city had turned into illusory swords. If one looks down from a high altitude, they will find that this place has become a separate land, as if it was cut off from the void. Longchen stretched out his hand and looked at the sword domain. Even he couldn't help but say in a daze, "Two lunatics, even the flow of time here has become chaotic. Let's go, I can't wait to see what the ninth heaven looks like. Beta Feng seemed a little excited. Long Chen nodded, and then everyone directly rose into the sky under his nirvana fire domain. Soon, everyone arrived at the eastern part of the 10th heaven. There is a huge teleportation array here that can lead them to the border of the 10th heaven. Such teleportation arrays can be found all over the 10 heavens, and even rulers can't damage them in the slightest. It has existed since ancient times, and it can directly teleport people to the border of the void. The so-called border of the void is the transit station between the two realms in the void. Everyone passed through the teleportation array together. When they opened their eyes again, they felt cold sweat all over their bodies. Countless astral winds swept in all directions, each of which seems to have the power to kill a heaven immortal. If it weren't for Long Chen's nirvana fire domain covering them, they would have been shredded to pieces the moment they appeared. However, they also found several hidden arrays, which should be connected to the Heaven Palace. There were a total of 9 hidden arrays, which corresponded to the 9 transit ancient arrays. The astral winds within a few meters of the array were completely blocked by the transit ancient arrays. If this place is used well, it can prevent the people of the 9th heaven from entering the 10th heaven through the array. To be able to establish a transit array in this void, the wisdom of our predecessors is beyond our reach. Ao Tsuncheong sighed with emotion. There were more than a dozen people following Ao Tsuncheong. There were so many people, and all of them were heaven immortals. When Long Chen fought with Yubaigu, he even inadvertently saw them. The only exception was the monster race elf scout who had been following Ao Tsuncheong. Long Chen only brought Beta Feng and the Holy Sword with him. He was looking for the 7 Meridians Divine General of the Firmament Divine Kingdom in his previous life. Chapter 634. The Flawless Man's 10 Directions Heaven Domain was an enormous independent space. It's more like a mountain range. The 10th heaven is located at the bottom, but it's like a mountaintop. Its area is relatively small. On the contrary, if the first heaven is compared to the 10th heaven, then the 10th heaven is just the tip of a mountain in the water. This mountain is located in the void, and it only intersects at the border. Long Chen, Ao Tsuncheong, and the others activated the array formation. In the void, rays of brilliance condensed around them, and everyone disappeared without a trace. Everyone traversed through the boundless void as astral winds surged in from all directions. From the 10th heaven to the 9th heaven, the astral winds they encountered when passing through the space barrier were extremely strong. All the heat was like a fish in the ocean, and the surrounding seawater was like the astral winds. Rustle. The astral winds swept through the brilliance around them, making violent friction sounds, but it was like a sharp blade scraping a steel plate. No one dared to move in the slightest, allowing the power of the array formation to take them through the space barrier. Even Long Chen was the same. In such a place, unless one has a connecting heaven realm cultivation base, once the power of the array formation disappears, they will be doomed eternally. This situation lasted for a few hours, until Long Chen and the others saw a light spot gradually approaching. At the same time, the brilliance around them also disappeared rapidly. When the brilliance disappeared, they were already standing on a huge transmission array. The array formation here is far more prosperous than the one they saw at the border of the 10th heaven. It's jade white in color, and it's dozens of meters long. Someone from the 10th heaven? Tell us your name. As soon as they landed, more than a dozen people shouted in a deep voice. Buzz. As soon as their voices fell, Long Chen led everyone down the white jade disk array. The Nirvana flame domain wrapped everyone in an instant. This place is located at the border. Although the astral winds are violent, Long Chen can still resist them. Hiss. Long Chen's move immediately caused the guards of the 9th heaven to exclaim in surprise. They all took a deep breath and hurriedly stood in the auxiliary array formation and bowed. Greetings, Sovereign Realm Expert. May I know why Senior has come here? The dozen or so people all had respectful expressions on their faces. Long Chen glanced at them and said indifferently, "We're here to look for some old friends." There's no need to report. After saying that, Longchen took everyone and disappeared. When they reappeared, they had already crossed the border of the ninth heaven. After arriving in the ninth heaven, the expressions of Aodsuncheong and the others seemed to be a bit gloomy. You and I will take our leave now. If there is a day when we die, just prepare the wine. Aodsuncheong patted Longchen's shoulder heavily. From his words, there seemed to be some guesses. Longchen smiled and nodded. He had never doubted Aodsuncheong's words. Looking at Aodsuncheong's receding figure, Longchen murmured, "To die, I alone am enough." The Big Dipper Phoenix frowned slightly but didn't ask. The two, one in front and one behind, headed southwest. Their goal seemed to be very clear. The Big Dipper Phoenix couldn't help but have some doubts. "My lord, who are we looking for today? Have you been to the ninth heaven before? I'm looking for divine generals like you. They are all waiting for me." The Big Dipper Phoenix was taken aback. Longchen really came to the ninth heaven before. He should be looking for old friends. On the other side. Less than half an hour after Longchen left, the guards at the border of the ninth heaven disappeared from the auxiliary array and returned to the ninth heavenly palace. The ninth heavenly palace. This is a dazzling palace that spans tens of thousands of miles. It's no more than 1,000 meters high. Such a heavenly palace is much smaller than the one in the 10th heaven, even compared to the one in the 10th heaven. However, its prosperity is by no means comparable to that of the 10th heaven. The entire palace is built with top-quality spirit stones, and the array inscriptions are carved with purple gold powder. When the sunlight shone down, it gave off a purple-gold glow. The entire celestial palace seemed to be an object from beyond the heavens, a land of gods. When the guard appeared, he was already standing in the palace, but his body was a little stiff, and he didn't even dare to blink his eyes. He clearly remembers that the last border guard who came here was turned into ashes because of a strand of hair falling into the palace. "Oh? You mean a Nirvana Lord from the 10th heaven who has condensed the Nirvana fire domain?" This was the voice of a woman. The woman's body was as white as snow, and she was floating in the jade dew pond naked. The woman is extremely beautiful, as if carved from jade, perfect and flawless. Even her hair was as white as jade, without a single blemish. Compared to Yehalan's heavenly beauty, this woman was beautiful, but she gave off an unreal feeling. However, no one in the heavenly palace knows what she looks like. No one even knows that she has never worn clothes, her feet have never touched the ground, and no one knows what she looks like. Because no one here dared to look up. In this place, the speed of death is always faster than the speed of looking up. Reporting to the flawless ruler, some time ago, there was a rumor that the nether ghost ruler of the 10th heaven has died. This person is probably the one who replaced him. The attendant's chin almost touched his chest, and he didn't dare to raise his head in the slightest.